Welcome to another Infinite Monkey Cage, which comes to you from Radio 4. Well, in this particular universe, but we can't be certain if you're listening in a parallel universe where it's being broadcast from, or indeed what it's actually about. I mean, in this universe, it's a mixture of wonderful science and odd meanders, whereas perhaps in another universe, it's a show about cooking parrotfish on a wooden wok. I think we've already gone too far. I'm Robin Ince. I'm without a science degree, but I am keen to learn.
And I'm Brian Cox, and I have a science degree. And in today's show, we'll be discussing the most misunderstood branch of science, quantum physics, the outstanding recent success of the largest experiment ever attempted, the Large Hadron Collider at CERN in Geneva, and some of the more outlandish and ridiculous theories of what we might find with it, including time anomalies and terrorist baguettes.
Terrorist baguette is going to be possibly one of the high points, but for me, one of the most interesting parts of this show is that I am a Pisces, and you're a Pisces, and we're both presenting science shows, so there has to be something in it, doesn't there?
Don't, Robin.
At this point, I should say that merely the mention of the fact that we were going to be doing astrology in this show has led to 3 people stopping following us on Twitter out of sheer fury, which is, as we know, very Taurian. So physics, though, is the predominant subject today, and I don't actually know very much about physics because it gives me a headache of confusion, and basically I curse physics for being counter-instinctual. But to make up for my silence, we're joined by actor, writer, and man who failed to finish his PhD in quantum physics, Ben Miller. Ben, who is also a Pisces. Come on, Brian. There's definitely something in it. And science writer and broadcaster Philip Bull, who's a Scorpio, so maybe there's not as much in it as I thought.
Back to the science. Ben, welcome to the monkey cage. Now, what was it that made you give up a promising career serving the good of civilization for a career prancing around in tights on the boards?
Well, I think I couldn't help noticing, Brian, that, you know, whenever I told some sort of creaky gag at footlights, it got a little bit of a reaction, but no one ever applauded when I solved an equation. I mean, in all honesty, you know, hand on heart, you know, I think that I always really, really loved physics, but I didn't have the technical ability you quite definitely need to pursue it to a high enough level, and I kind of thought better to do something that I feel I'm really good at and that I have a passion for than something I'm okay at and have a passion for. You know, it doesn't in any way diminish my love of physics, but, you know, that love was somewhat unrequited.
That's a very eloquent defence.
So you didn't finish your PhD. How far did you get?
Well, I did it for 3 years, so I suppose I basically had the summer holiday and didn't write the essay.
Yeah, most people are writing up at that point.
Exactly. I mean, I was ready to start writing it up.
Well, hopefully, at the end of the show, Ben, we might have a little bit of a surprise for you, and some news on your PhD. But also because we have... yes, it's enigmatically ominous.
My PhD supervisor, I'm leaving now. Please don't do that to me.
We've had a lot of physicists on, so we decided to try and build a bridge by having Philip Bull, who is both a chemist and a physicist. But because chemists feel that they're not catered for enough on this show, I thought I would ask you a little bit about the arrogance of physicists like Brian Cox, who do now say that it's all physics, that everything else is nonsense, all science is basically physics.
Well, I mean, having seen it from both sides, I know that there are physicists who are terrified of chemistry. And they may not always admit that.
And things, aren't there? Things set on fire.
You have to remember things in chemistry. You know, you have to remember these 100+ elements, and that's tricky for physicists because, you know, they'd like to sort of start from first principles and work it out, but you can't really work this stuff out in chemistry, let alone biology. I mean, now it's very trendy for physicists to get into biology, and a lot of them are doing that, and some of them are doing that very well, and some of them are doing it with that kind of arrogance that they're going to come in and, you know, explain the whole of biology. I mean, there is a noble tradition in biology of physicists coming along and, you know, solving problems. I mean, Francis Crick started as a physicist, but, you know, there is that danger that physicists just sort of go for the big picture, and in biology, the details often are crucial to what's going on. You just can't throw them out.
Now, Ben, this is a science show, so let's get back to physics, talk about quantum physics. What is it? Very simply.
What is quantum physics? Well, there are 2 theories in physics which work reliably, and one deals with the physics of very big things, which is general relativity, and the other deals very well with the physics of very small things, and that would be quantum physics. So, I mean, if quantum physics were a better theory, it would be a description of everything, but it's not, unfortunately. It just tends to work extremely well for sizes of a few atoms and below. And most of our technology is basically built on semiconductor devices, and those all require an understanding of quantum physics.
But you see, Phil, that here we are again with basic physics. That's the reason for chemistry, isn't it?
Well,
you wouldn't have atomic structure without that.
Yeah, no, I was just thinking. I mean, quantum theory is central to the whole of chemistry. It's central to our understanding of why one atom joins to another and how molecules are made and how materials are made. All of it, in the end, has to be described by quantum theory. That's the only way you can get an adequate description of what's going on. So not only is it central to, all of these technological devices that we have, but it's really central to just the whole of how matter is built and how it behaves.
So the whole world, Robin, the whole world.
Yeah. Well, anyway, welcome back, those you listening ready forward, to a show called Why Physicists Are Really Best, presented predominantly by Brian Cox. Now, Ben, you've been talking very authoritatively about quantum physics, but we also sent you out to discover something which many people, I don't even know whether pseudoscience would be the correct term, but you have a certain, just an interest in the world of astrology.
I had an immense interest in getting my horoscope read. I don't know if that's quite the same. I mean, I'm a passionate believer in science, but I'm also well up for Buddhism, astrology, Reiki, whatever you've got. Really. Feng Shui. I find them absolutely fascinating. I could go some way, actually, to making an argument for why astrology is really just a belief system on the same base, in the same way that science is or physics is.
And therefore, you went off and you saw Jonathan Kaner.
No less. Yeah, who lives in the most purple room I've ever seen. He didn't have a cape, but I wouldn't have been at all surprised if there's one hanging on the back of the door there.
Okay, so I'm going to put in Ben Miller and your date of birth.
24th of the 2nd, 66.
And that you were born, you think, around 5:40 in the morning.
Yeah.
Therefore, you are a Piscean, which is the thing you know about yourself already.
Yeah.
And you've got Neptune close to your south node, interestingly enough, which, according to ancient tradition, means that you have issues with your imagination, whereby you must have an amazing ability to imagine the worst, I would have thought.
I did think you maybe weren't going to turn up when we were waiting outside your flat.
The next thing that we see here is that there is Venus bang on the ascendant, in other words, Venus
on the horizon.
On the horizon, and that's considered very fortuitous. You are seen by the world as somebody who is very creative, very artistic, perhaps musical, and so to have Venus on the horizon is considered an auspicious placement for Venus, although I notice that it's unaspected, which also implies that you may have spent a fair degree of your life wondering which particular area in which to best invest your talents.
Well, it's funny you should say that. That's why I'm on this programme. Yeah.
Well, you are what could best be described as a multiple Piscean, which is not a crime, but it's worth bearing in mind that Pisces gets a bad rap in astrology. It's generally, associated with a kind of vague, airy-fairy, woolly attitude to life and a tendency to be very poetic and very dreamy and not very organised, but in fact what Pisceans are is magnificently intuitive. They don't need to be ruthlessly analytical because they instinctively find the right things to do or say, even if they have no idea why they did or said them.
Apparently, three of us on the programme, in fact, Brian, Robin and myself, are all Piscean. So I don't know what that says about this programme, but
it says you're in good company. Einstein was a Piscean, and he apparently intuited his way towards many of the great conclusions that he reached and the understandings that he came to. People often say that Pisces isn't supposed to be a very scientific sign, it's supposed to be a very dreamy, artistic sign, and perhaps you might argue that all three of you have wandered into science as an area of interest, if only because being so naturally gifted with an airy-fairy and easygoing look at the world, it's a natural mechanism to want to compensate by being earthed by a world full of rules, regulations and laws of things which have to be proven before they can be accepted.
But given that personality is so complex, if you like, what influence could the position of a planet have on personality?
There are all kinds of explanations in inverted commas as to how astrology might work, and I don't personally buy into any of them. I don't believe there are invisible strings, etheric bodies, or subtle magnetic pools which science has yet to discover a way to measure or monitor. I think the whole thing is much more to do with, for want of a better word, coincidence. A kind of rather glorious coincidence. There is a clock in the heavens, a very complicated one with lots of hands, and the great attraction of astrology has always been that you can tell the time in lots of very fascinating ways according to the rhythmic cycles of the planets, and I don't believe it's got anything to do with cause and effect. I think it's reflection. It's just a question of saying, oh, look, it's 5 o'clock, and in most people's lives, therefore, it's time to get out the office and start heading for home, or it's 9 a.m., time to start, and in a similar sort of way, the sky reflects a kind of mood which people feel on the Earth. People used to say, is astrology an art or a science? And I never found a satisfactory answer to that. I think it's a belief system is much simpler.
And what do you think the main use of it is? What do you think it kind of gives people?
Astrology, as it's practiced in the modern world today, gives people a wondrous opportunity to look at themselves in more detail, and it gives them a language with which to describe aspects of the psyche which might otherwise not be so easy to categorise. Most personality research is still relatively klutzy. It talks about, are you an extrovert or an introvert? Well, here you can go a lot further than that, and you can say, what issues affect your attitude to love, to money, to circumstances where you feel under stress or pressure. We're all different people at different times, and I like the fact that astrology reflects that.
Jonathan, it's been absolutely fascinating talking to you, and I'm going to go and buy some purple cushions because I just love the look of this room.
Ben, you went in there with quite an open mind, but were there any moments where you were actually surprised by anything that Jonathan said to you?
Well, I think he's a tremendously perceptive man. One of my questions to him was like, how much do you think this is intrinsic to the qualities of astrology, and how much is it that just you're brilliant at intuiting people, And I think you've got to think about what the purposes of these things are, and I think that astrology has a role to play in a society where we don't understand ourselves particularly well. You create this whole framework where people can kind of be a bit self-indulgent, but also think a little bit about our psyche and how it's put together,
Phil, you've written about astrology, or certainly the emergence of astronomy from astrology. I suppose what Ben said there about it coming from a society that doesn't really understand the natural world, that was true initially for astrology, with its origins, back many thousands of years. I would argue it isn't true today. We know very well how the universe works. But can you describe how it originated?
Maybe first of all, I'd say that if you take seriously how it originated and the fact that it has a place in the history of ideas, I think it then makes it very difficult to take it seriously today, because it arose in a completely different social circumstance. I mean, its origins certainly go back sort of 2,000 years, if not longer. I mean, in some sense, people have probably always looked at the stars for some sort of inspiration and guidance. But if you think about how it was perpetuated in the Middle Ages, that was a very hierarchical society, and the idea that there was this sort of natural hierarchy in nature whereby the heavens governed what happened on the earth was just a natural way of thinking. At that time, there was a mystery. I mean, more than there is today, and there was also a much more dangerous, much more hazardous world that people lived in, and astrology could give them some sense of having some control. Also, it's such a sort of vague system, and there are so many different interpretations of it, that it's actually one that's very hard to disprove.
But I suppose people haven't changed that much. I mean, this is what you were saying, I think, Ben, about the attraction of it today.
It's the true of all those sort of, Reiki, homeopathy. I think, they have a use. They have a most definite use, but I would say that their use is in providing a solution, you see, because science doesn't really provide answers. Science is just question upon question upon question. And I think what's so satisfying to people is certainty.
But I would say, whilst astrology is a relatively harmless version of pseudoscientific certainty, many pseudosciences, particularly in the medical field, are not harmless. And for me, what bothers me about astrology is that it's part of a slippery slope of irrationality. I would say.
Well, I disagree, because I mean, what we're really talking about here is the placebo effect, isn't it, basically? Because after seeing Jonathan, I felt better. I felt like something had been made sense of. The thing that's really powerful about the placebo effect is it works whether or not you believe in it. I mean, they've done scientific tests, for example, with placebo, and it doesn't matter whether you're told it's a placebo or not, it still works. So you're not at risk of people suffering because they don't understand the science. Actually, it's inbuilt into us as human beings to benefit from the placebo effect, whether we know it's a placebo or not.
But Phil, you're frowning through pretty much all of that. So, is it harmless fun that maybe has a mild placebo effect to make you feel better, or is there something more problematic for our scientific culture?
I think there are elements of both of those things. I do have sympathy with the notion that for some people, if it makes them feel better in the way that it made Ben feel better, you can understand why people would go to it. But I also have a lot of sympathy for the concern that it blurs the boundaries between what is correct and what is incorrect, between false beliefs in the way the world works and ones that we have some evidence for.
Well, in that case, let me get philosophical on your ass.
Go on, Ben.
What Jonathan Kahner's doing is placing a blind faith in a sort of black box. Astrology is a black box. He doesn't know how it works. He doesn't know how the positions of the stars in the heavens affect people's personality, but he believes there's a connection, and if you give him a map of the sky, he'll tell you what effect that has on your personality. What are we doing in science other than taking the black box of mathematics and saying, I believe the universe can be described by mathematics. I don't know why mathematics is true. I just know that it works. I just know that if I formulate a string theory, despite whether there's any evidence for it or against it. I know because it's a beautiful mathematical theory, and I believe in mathematics.
I think this is entirely false. This whole argument is absolutely baseless. What I would say, I'm sorry, but what I would say is that mathematics is a modelling tool primarily. So primarily the way that science proceeds is you observe the world, you make models of that world, and mathematics is a useful tool for doing that. You can predict different behaviour, you can go for look for them. So the experimental method combined with mathematical models has given us the 21st century world that we see today.
Then you've fallen right into my trap, because that's exactly what Jonathan Kahner is doing with astrology. He's using it as a modelling tool. Because the point is surely that, if you take, physical theory such as quantum theory, and you say, I'm using mathematics as a modelling tool, what you're admitting is this isn't true in the philosophical sense of quantum mechanics isn't true in that there's not a one-to-one correspondence between my mental idea of quantum mechanics and how the world behaves. Quantum mechanics is a model, it has a relative scientific truth, and we will hold to it for as long as it's borne up by experiment. I mean, that's the only real difference, I think, between Jonathan Kahner and Brian Cox.
Phil,
we're going to leave it there. We're going to leave. No, Brian.
Phil,
we have to leave it.
Phil must have a word.
I want it to end on Brian Cox and Jonathan Kahner hand in hand. We will leave Brian Cox briefly to simmer and be full of fury, which again was interestingly predicted by Jonathan Kahner. So there we are. Maybe he knew this was going to happen.
Phil's simmering as well.
Phil's simmering, but he's not simmering with the same kind of effect. There's not quite the same amount of righteous ire bubbling under the eyes. We're going to move away from astrology and move on to something that Brian will enjoy talking about. It is CERN, the place where he works, and the place where he eats his lunch in a clumsy manner, sometimes slowing down the system.
The place he works. I've never... when are you ever there? Presenting TV shows.
The last time I was there, Ben, was probably with you.
Yeah.
Have you been following the progress of the Large Hadron Collider?
Yeah, I was so excited. I mean, it was very, very exciting when they got the two beams going around the track a couple of weeks back. That was fantastic.
Yeah. Well, the LHC is the largest scientific experiment ever attempted. 27 kilometres in circumference. It sits below the surface of Geneva. We accelerate protons to 99.999999% the speed of light. They go around the ring 11,000 times a second and will collide up to 600 million times a second when the LHC is at full luminosity, thereby recreating the conditions that were present less than a billionth of a second after the Big Bang and allowing us to learn more about the structure of the universe and the forces that make it work.
Have you said that before, Brian?
Ben!
Yes. Yeah.
I mean, when we visited CERN, what did you think of the place? So this was last year before the accident,
amazing.
which has now
It's
been
amazing.
fixed.
I've never seen a place that looks more disappointing on the surface. I mean, it basically looks like a sort of disused French farm. As if you sort of very disappointing looking corrugated iron buildings and a bit of rubbish blowing about. And then you get beneath the surface, you go down these incredible high-tech lift shafts down into this incredible sort of James Bond supervillain, just the most extraordinarily large, impressive bit of equipment. It's like a cathedral to science. It's just, the size of it is absolutely breathtaking.
Philip, were you surprised at all at the amount this captured the public imagination? Because as someone who tries to popularise science, it was last year, maybe it was the idea of the end of the world, maybe it was just the hope it was a new Dan Brown plot, but it was across the newspapers in a way that kind of serious science isn't normally.
It was great to see that. Without a doubt. I don't know whether I was surprised. I mean, clearly they have a lot to sell. I mean, the scale of the operation, the kind of questions that they're asking. I think it was fantastic that it had that sort of coverage. I have to say, black holes and the end of the world, in the end, played a large part in that interest as well. But maybe that's just part and parcel. Maybe we just have to accept that that's going to be a way in for some people.
Well, you know what annoys me, because I do go to Geneva occasionally, is that I have to go all that way across Europe to the Alps to use a particle accelerator. But those pros from Dover have been tinkering around with one of their very own.
I came as soon as I could, Morris. What is it? What's happened?
Desmond, you may know of my work concerning Higgs Boson.
The hypothetical massive scalar elementary particle predicted to exist by the standard model of particle physics?
Precisely.
No.
Well, in order to observe this phenomenon, I have built my own rudimentary hadron collider.
My God! But a machine built to achieve particle acceleration on that scale would cost some...
$8.3 billion.
I see. So I don't suppose you've got that fiver,
I'm afraid not.
When do you intend to test it?
Well, that's rather it, you see. Last night I was working late in the laboratory and...
You activated the particle accelerator?
Yes, and, something happened.
What?
$8.3 billion.
I see. So I don't suppose you've got that fiver...
They've torn apart the very fabric of time.
My God, you mean...
Yes, you and I are now trapped in...
When do you intend to test it?
Well, that's rather it, you see. Late last night I was working in...
Maybe a solution.
Go on.
Theoretically, it may be possible to cause this loop in time which you've created to decay exponentially.
To the point where it's simply absorbed into the original timeline.
Precisely.
There's not a moment to lose. I'll power up the hadron collider.
As soon as I could, Morris. What is it? What's happened?
Desmond, you may know of my work concerning Higgs Boson.
The hypothetical massive scalar elementary particle predicted to exist by...
Welcome to another Infinite Monk...
Moment to lose. I'll power up the hadron collider.
Good man, but listen carefully. We must ensure that... Otherwise, you and I may be responsible for the annihilation of the entire...
Complete success! Well, it was a close-run thing, but I think we can safely say that the timeline has been restored.
Congratulations all round. Hip hip,
Hooray!
Hip hip, hooray! It came as soon as I could, Morris. What is it? What's happened?
Desmond, you may know of my work concerning Higgs Boson.
The hypothetical massive scalar elementary particle predicted to exist by Peter Andre.
Oh, I love a fade in a sketch.
When you went out there, and this was just before the whole thing was starting up, the experiment was about to begin, and what was your level of disappointment when everyone was going, it's going to happen, it's gone wrong, we need to do some more soldering?
Do you know, in all honesty, my level of disappointment was zero. Because, the thing you've got to understand about the LHC is this is like engineering at the absolute, forefront of human understanding. It'd be absolutely extraordinary if a machine like that just worked straight out of the box. It just doesn't happen. In this area of experiment, have you ever done an experiment at school? I mean, when did they ever, when did they ever work? You have to kind of hone it and work at it and understand the major task of any experiment to begin with is something they call calibration. It's just simply understanding the machine and making sure it's working like you think it should work. That is actually the majority of what any experimental physicist does. The bit where you get the results, that's the very, very last, moment.
Yeah, Phil, some physicists have criticised the openness with which CERN had proceeded. Not necessarily they should do it in secret, but the fact that there was a lot of publicity, and then you see a very complicated machine being, understood and coaxed into life. I mean, do you think there was any sense in which it was a mistake to bear science to this scrutiny, or do you think it's a good thing?
I think it's definitely a good thing because it shows how science is done. If suddenly you came out with these with these wonderful results that you'd found the Higgs boson. Well, for a start, they wouldn't be perceived as wonderful. People wouldn't particularly care. They wouldn't know what it was all about. But also, it would give the impression that science is magic. That you have this, already, you have these crazy theories about what this machine is going to do. It would just encourage that position if somehow it was this buried thing under the ground that no one had seen inside of or knew about, and then suddenly it was going to start producing these wonderful things. So I think, showing the grubby details, the fact that, you have an accident and there's all this dust in the tunnels, I think it's very instructive.
Because of that very positive note that you've actually brought, I think there is almost a chance for a treat. And as both we suggested and Jonathan Kaner predicted in your astrological chart today, Ben Miller, in the Daily Mail, there is a little bit of a surprise coming your way. Now, do you recognise this voice?
Ben, something seems to have gone wrong with the office work. Nobody has a copy of your PhD thesis.
You haven't spoken to him in nearly 20 years, but he's here to demand your PhD finally. Your former supervisor, Emeritus Professor of Physics at Cambridge and the Pender Chair of Nanoelectronics at University College London, Professor Sir Michael Pepper.
Mike, has anything that I've said in this programme been true or accurate in any way?
True, Ben. Absolutely. You're a great communicator.
You're not going to mark me on it.
Professor Pepper, what was Ben like as a student?
Elusive. Very good. We all enjoyed Ben, actually. We were very disappointed when he left, but we all followed his career. And, it's very good. Very good to see, actually. So a lot of people, when they do their PhDs, they go off into finance industry, they do risk analysis, derivatives, all that sort of thing, and they end up making people very unhappy. Ben makes them happy, doesn't he? So it must be a good thing.
Do you think there's any chance that he could actually come back and finish his thesis?
Well, it has moved on. I'm sure he could do a very good thesis, but it's probably best he stays as the great communicator, really. I think that's probably better, actually, than being locked away in a lab for a while.
You missed a second career as a diplomat, Mike.
Professor Sir Michael Pepper, thank you very much for joining us. That's all we've got time for this week. Thank you very much, Ben Miller, Philip Ball and Professor Sir Michael Pepper. Next week we'll be decorating our monkey cage with an infinite amount of tinsel and donning our cassocks with the Dean of Guildford, Victor Stock and comedian Chris Addison for our Christmas special, which is the same show but with it's just nearer to the 25th of December. There's no difference.
They're really going to put this out on Radio 4.
Hello, I'm Robin Ince.
And I'm Brian Cox.
And today we're going to be talking about quantum theory. Quantum theory is one of the foundations of modern physics, a collection of theoretical ideas and techniques dating back over a century that provides the most accurate description we have of the natural world, with the exception of gravitational interactions. Obviously. It is also, however, arguably the most misunderstood area of modern science, a gateway to pseudoscience and, to quote one of our panellists today, a theory which has had reams of drivel penned in its name. In today's programme, we will be asking why this is the case. What is it about quantum mechanics that makes it such a useful vehicle for woo merchants, snake oil sales, men and women, and new age healers?
Now, today's show is going to be very difficult for me and the panel because, due to the time Monkey Cage is broadcast, we're unable to respond in language strong enough to represent our true feelings about the misunderstanding and misuse of quantum theory. So we've decided to introduce some code words which we can use to indicate our anger or indignation without causing offence. The code words are
daisy flattener, nose tingler, Merlin's bucket.
Now, in order to demonstrate their use, I'll read a quote from a non-mainstream practitioner of quantum theory, and Robin will respond according to the guidelines. Our bodies ultimately are fields of information, intelligence and energy. Quantum healing involves a shift in the fields of energy information.
Got to say, that sounds to me like a bit of a daisy flattener. Now, interestingly, our producer said, can you say it sounds to you like, because I don't want to get in any legal problems. So the idea that we might be taken to court and they accused me of my work being daisy flattening is a court case I was looking forward to.
Here's another real one. If a quantum field holds us all together in its invisible web, we have to rethink our definitions of ourselves and how we interact with every facet of our lives.
I would have thought that's a nose tingler. A field full of nose tinglers.
And one last one. Although relativistic quantum field theories are built with causality in mind, the way causality plays out at the level of the particle dynamics is not so clear.
That is the biggest Merlin's bucket of them all.
It is, except it's taken from the abstract of a paper that I wrote with one of our panellists.
But you've got to admit, would you believe that? So, to help us through this fog of superpositions, we have three panellists, and they are...
My name's Ben Goldacre. I'm an NHS doctor and an academic, and I write books about science like Bad Science and the recent facetiously titled I Think You'll Find It's a Bit More Complicated Than That. And my favourite form of bamboozlement is people who pretend for elaborate magical reasons that their fabulous intervention cannot, for some special reason, be tested in a randomised controlled trial.
I'm Jeff Forshaw. I'm a professor of particle physics at the University of Manchester, and I've written a book called The Quantum Universe with Brian. I hate bamboozling people at parties. It means I've explained something in a particularly rubbish way. My favourite fancy idea, though, is the idea that we can trace the evolution of the universe, starting from a time when all of the matter in the visible universe was compressed to something about the size of a beach ball, and we can use our understanding of the universe at that time to predict the way the galaxies are scattered across the sky.
Still haven't got that first 10 to the minus 37 of a second done yet, have you, lazy?
That's where the woo merchants live.
What, the woo lives in the first 10 to the minus 37. That is where the Merlin's bucket lies.
Hello, my name's Sarah Pascoe. I'm a comedian, but I got a double B at Science GCSE. And so I'm meant to be here. And I'm currently writing my first book, which is about a woman's body. And I've been accused of quackery myself because I'm talking a lot on stage at the moment about sperm and how basically men have got two kinds of sperm, kamikaze and egg getters. And kamikaze is like 99%, and it's blockers and fighters. And so I'm really fun at parties at the moment. But
and this is our panel. Ben, as the member of the panel who's probably been involved most in kind of investigating different medical and scientific claims, what would you define woo as? Because someone I was arguing with says, so anything that's unproved science is woo. Now, I wouldn't say that was woo necessarily. What for you is woo?
I think it's about the reasons why people are doing it. So it's the either deliberate or, at best, incompetent use of sciencey sounding language or the appearance of science, wearing a white coat, using professional titles like professor or doctor or qualifications, in order to give an appearance of being sciencey, in order to sell a product or a potion or a special healing system.
And what do you think it is about the ideas of quantum theory that are so alluring sometimes in that world of selling what may well be charlatanism and bamboozlement?
So I think a lot of it is about the fact that if you want your quack idea to survive, it has to have various characteristics. It has to be relatively resistant to debunking. And so in my experience of having to write about these things, I mean, I did it every week for The Guardian for a decade, you end up having arguments with lawyers where they're going, well, how can we really be sure that this stuff that they're saying really is nonsense, and can you talk me through it? And when somebody's used a lot of sciencey sounding language in a superficially plausible way, it's actually quite difficult to talk a lawyer around. And then also worse than that, they'll say, oh, well, with Reynolds' defence, we have to give them right of reply. So you'd write your best effort to give a clear explanation of why what they're saying is wrong and unpicking their misuse of scientific terminology. And then you're obliged by the libel laws to allow them to give you a paragraph of Daisy Flatner that you then have to put at the end. And then you feel kind of that you can't let that lie, and then you're caught in this endless circle of, well, I'm going to have to explain why that's rubbish. And then, so I think it's a survival strategy for creating a kind of hassle barrier to make it difficult for you to tear their ideas apart.
So in a sense, it's the perceived difficulty of the theory itself.
Yeah,
allows
absolutely.
a lot of wriggle room.
But also I think there's something very attractive about quantum terminology, because it allows you to take... I mean, the recurring theme seems to be that people take quite banal observations. Like there was a video that you sent round, and in this video that Robin sent round, she's sort of saying, oh, we're all entangled, we're all socially connected, and we're all entangled together, and that's a lot like quantum entanglement. And it's almost as if, I think, obviously nobody's going to give you any money just for making the completely fatuous and obvious observation that we're all socially connected. And if you want to make that proprietary and owned and saleable and special and unique, then you have to bolt on some nonsense. And I think that's where the appeal of quantum stuff comes from. It's a way of making banal, superficial observations somehow more than just themselves.
Well, because that's what I don't know if you saw it as well.
Yeah.
So, which is
Yeah.
a lot which says is very nice. It's a nice, we need to work together. We're all in this together.
I think the problem could be that science is using words, and words is how we make stories. That's the building block for fun narratives and mermaids and fairies and this great stuff. And so because science is using them, we can then put them together in other ways, however we want. And maybe you guys should just use symbols all the time. So I was thinking quantum could be like a fish's tail, and mechanics could be a wrench, and just the pictures, and then we can't take that anymore and make better stories.
We see, yeah, if you'd kept it all just to your equations, which we haven't got a clue about.
We can't do
I mean,
that.
I read the easy guide to quantum mechanics, but the moment I actually get to now, like, oh no, this is, I become... So if you'd kept it as your own little language of equations, everything would be fine.
Well, I should say, Jeff, I mean, so can you define, just so we know what we're speaking about, quantum mechanics in about a minute or so, what actually is
I'll have a
it?
go. Yeah. Well, what it is, it's a set of rules. So as far as we can tell, everything in the universe is made up of particles, and it's a set of rules that explain how those particles hop around. And it's a very simple set of rules. It usurped Newton's ideas on how the basic building blocks of the universe operated, largely in order that it should explain how atoms work, which he did with wonderful success. And it's totally outrageous affront to common sense, which is why it attracts all of this stuff. Because it paints a picture of the world which is almost magical, which is why it's wonderful. These particles behave exactly as if a single particle can be in more than one place at the same time. And we have to keep track of all the possible things that a particle or a bunch of particles could possibly do. We have to keep track of them all, and then keeping track of each possibility gives rise to a number. We add the numbers up in the end, and that gives us the probability of a certain outcome in an experiment. So the output of quantum mechanics is probabilities of outcomes in experiments, and the way we do it is by thinking about the world in these remarkable ways.
What you said earlier about when you start explaining quantum theory, and you use this term, like it's almost magical, it's counterintuitive, it's strange, there are strange concepts. We actually, one of the letters we got from a listener, it says here, provocatively, I'm suggesting that by constantly proclaiming that anything that can happen will happen, which is the subtitle of a well-known book on quantum physics that we wrote, it allows quacks to use this as a catch-all justification for improbable science. The sense is, and I know I've received some of this criticism when we talk about quantum theory, because the ideas are odd, it's thought that we are, by trying to explain the theory in language rather than symbols, enabling quackery.
Well, that's nonsense. I mean, it is like everything that can happen does happen. It's that wonderful. We can't be responsible for people then just making stuff up, which is what...
But I suppose then that a plausible response from the what's a word that isn't libelous that you could use instead of quack? I don't know. Anyway, these people, they may wish to misrepresent that and say, well, okay, therefore, my consciousness is somehow connected to the consciousness of someone, because we're all made of particles, aren't we? And they're quantum things, and they all seem to be interconnected, and so therefore we're all interconnected. Do we have a responsibility to try and prevent people from doing that, or is our responsibility just to talk about the science?
Well, we've got a responsibility probably to explain carefully when we write a book like that how it is that we understand words like that. How do we come to make conclusions that the world behaves in this very strange way? And perhaps also explain just how difficult it is to secure knowledge and how easy it is to be wrong. I tell my PhD students, before you show me anything, just assume that what you've written is total rubbish. Just start with that in mind and try and convince me otherwise, because I'm going to assume that. And that completely changes the way that you...
That's very much how we work in the art, isn't it, Sarah?
It is.
But I suppose that's the opposite.
It's so difficult to get anything right. That's that it's very, very easy to make things up, but so tremendously hard to...
It actually fits in with what Ben was saying about the framework within which ideas are difficult to challenge is almost, I suppose, a meaningless framework or an unhelpful framework in a sense.
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the things that defines quackery is avoiding critical scrutiny of your ideas, and I think that's the spirit in which people are often deploying this kind of language. It's to create a barrier to understanding. It's to deliberately make themselves unintelligible and difficult to understand in order to make themselves seem like they're better and more powerful than you. And actually that's kind of the exact opposite of what I, for example, would try to do as a doctor. When I'm seeing somebody and explaining their medication to them or their diagnosis, I'm going out of my way to make it as understandable as possible and to try and undermine and take away any kind of inherent power imbalance that may be a product of class or fear or anxiety. And I think what quacks do is exactly the opposite of that. They use language deliberately to confuse rather than to explicate.
Is it really deliberate? Because I think, being very outside this and actually much more dispassionate than all of you, about this, not in general in life. I'm proper fun, but I mean, I don't, this isn't anywhere near my heart. I just think it's really interesting. So being where I am, it looks to me like lots of people believe what they're selling or they're saying, and sometimes they've misunderstood something or they've taken energy to mean whatever they want it to mean, and then they're regurgitating language, but they all seem very good-hearted. It just seems like they're coming from a different angle. From my position, probably like most people, absolutely knowing nothing about science, you just have to pick a side, really. So I've never seen any dinosaur fossils, but I think probably evolution is the best story. And it's similar with this. If a person has a choice between you guys and someone else with crystals, they're just picking.
I think this is a similar. I think that a large number of these people are very sincere. I think that it's a kind of seduction that people trap, that people fall into. I mean, I fall into it. When I like my ideas to be right, and I don't like being wrong, but I'm wrong nearly all the time. So when it's a case of really interrogating and trying to be honest with yourself, fight that massive bias that you think you know something. So you think you know something, you've got a theory about the world. That's a tremendously seductive position, especially when it gives meaning to your life. And so I think a lot of these people are swept away by that.
I think it's all human beings. The mind, it creates a model very early in life about how things work. It's like when people are brought up very religious. And then what happens is anyone who's trying to absolutely sweep away that belief, you see as an enemy, which I think is why you're experiencing so much aggression. What I've enjoyed reading about recently is all these experiments they've done really cruelly with things like kittens. They put kittens in a cage where they only showed them horizontal bars until they were 6. So they're grown-up cats. And then they put in horizontal ones, and they all walked into the bars because they couldn't see them because it doesn't make sense to their world. And I think really similarly, if you believe in energy working in a certain way and you've used the language that you've learned, anyone who disagrees with you think is part of some conspiracy because they see you as the man, like trying to stop them getting to the real truth, the real spiritual happiness that we could all just have. And what's so great about scientists is you have had to train yourself all the time with your minds not to ever let yourself go, I just feel this is right. I just know it's this. Whereas everyone else, we function like that, I think.
So I think it's worth interrogating why we find these people so spectacularly irritating. And I think part of that is obviously that they are adopting our clothes and our terminology and trying to borrow authority that we kind of feel that we don't even particularly want to have, because science is actually quite anti-authority. But I wonder if it's also because their projection of what they seem to think we are like feels so offensive, because what they seem to think we're like is people who deliberately obfuscate, people who deliberately attempt to appear authoritative or threatening or hierarchical, wear white coats, constantly refer to ourselves as professors, as Brian Cox does. But maybe what we really dislike is that they're giving us an incredibly ugly reflection of ourselves, which we are adamant that we are not.
But is it also the case that, and Carl Sagan often made this case very strongly, particularly in the demon-haunted world, is that science is a candle in the dark. The idea that because we live in a society that's based on science, and particularly in your field of medicine, respecting evidence, and society supporting evidence-based treatment, supporting vaccination programs, etc., etc. These things are very important. And so it's more than just it hurts scientists' feelings to have these people out there.
Absolutely.
The more that it becomes acceptable to say, well, there are alternative ways of looking at reality. So whilst you as a doctor may say this is the best treatment, my guru over here says this, that actually can be dangerous and can indeed undermine public health programs.
I think that's right, but I think not so much locally. So I think I'm not particularly upset or worried that individual people might be harmed because they go and get their cancer treated by some quantum energy guru. I mean, harm might be done, but I'm almost willing to see that as a kind of consent issue, or
Darwinian.
Exactly, yeah, sort of sadistic. a voluntary self-administered tax on scientific ignorance with the price of death. But I think
that's some game show, isn't it?
but I think what's actually more worrying is that when the value of science and evidence-based practice, whether it's in medicine or social policy, is undermined by people saying, well, actually, it doesn't really matter if you do evidence-based practice properly or not. You can just make up these flowery-sounding words. I think that's really corrosive because that undermines all of our efforts to try and get more evidence-based practice in medicine, in social policy, in education, in crime, everywhere. And that's I think, what the real danger is. Not that some idiots go to talk to some other idiots and exchange cash.
Well, that's what I want to add, because sometimes when you say woo merchants, etc., we may well have very specific ideas of these, kind of gurus. But I mean, some things that I've read as well, in terms of in general practice, etc., for a lot of the 20th century, a lot of the things that we would have received from, people that we would consider to be the experts, from doctors, even within mainstream medicine, are there still, were there areas, and are there still areas of woo there?
Oh, definitely. I mean, I think that... So firstly, we weren't actually very good at evidence-based practice in medicine until fairly recently. So we didn't need to be very good at trials in the era of medicine when what we had either worked or didn't work, sort of very dramatic life-saving things. And we didn't have to be very good at evidence-based practice in the days when nobody really had anything much that worked. So in the time when homeopathy became very popular, for example, a lot of what mainstream doctors did was actively quite harmful, like bloodletting. And actually, there's I think there's a cholera outbreak where people treated in the homeopathic hospital do better than people treated by the medics, for the simple fact that at least they were only handing out sugar pills. And so I think historically we've been quite bad at evidence-based practice. Even now, I write all the time about the shortcomings in evidence-based medicine, how we fail to implement the noble principles of evidence-based practice. But the difference is at least we have these noble principles that we are attempting to manifest in our daily practice, whereas quacks don't.
Well, I was going to, Sarah, throw something at you, which is, as we were saying, we're both non-scientists, therefore, this is from a book which deals, amongst other things, with quantum healing.
Okay.
And I'll ask you, first of all, this is about people who have had, sometimes when an occasional spontaneous remission of cancer occurs.
Yeah.
And the reason for this is such patients apparently jump to a new level of consciousness that prohibits the existence of cancer. This is a quantum jump from one level of functioning to a higher level. Now, when you first hear that, I just wondered what is your initial reaction?
Well, first of all, I was cured of cancer. Thank you for that. And I think this is the thing, right, with not knowing certain things and how uncomfortable that feels. So for most people, if you get very sick or somebody that you know and you care about gets very sick, that is as senseless as anything. Lots of things that happen in the world, we can't fit into making any sense. How is this fair? And then when something even more unexplainable, like that going away when your doctor, or many doctors, told you that it wouldn't, I can understand. Again, I'm just trying to be empathetic. If you're living in a grey area, it doesn't make you an idiot, it doesn't make you stupid, it makes you you're feeling with emotions, and then you're finding explanations, or picking anything that makes sense. That to somebody will make more sense than we don't understand why your cancer went away.
One of the things that I find is most often misunderstood about science is that research scientists certainly operate on the edge of the known and the unknown, on the dividing line between the two. That's the point. That's why you do research science. So being comfortable and delighted with not knowing is perhaps not a natural state. As Sarah said there, you want a narrative, you want explanations.
I was that very same thought came when Sarah was speaking. I really like to be, it's a very important thing for me to be in a position where I don't know things. So being on that precipice and because it gives me an opportunity to learn something. And that sense of embracing ignorance and a lack of knowledge and really liking it, really wanting to be there, I wonder where that came from, because I'm sure that I wasn't like that when I was a 6-year-old boy. I'm sure I thought I knew everything when I was a 6-year-old, and probably certainly as a teenager. And I think it's come about having done lots of physics, so having kind of gone into physics and seen how it works, and then seeing that there is a type of knowledge which you can secure with hard work, and seeing how it delivers big ideas like quantum physics that have completely changed my world. my perspective on the world has been transformed by it. And I don't want, having secured that kind of certain knowledge, to, maybe this is part of an answer to what Ben was saying as well about it just terrifies me, the concept of peddling or embracing ideas that are wildly speculative and so I'd rather just assume everything is wrong and enjoy the knowledge that I can secure.
Certainty. There's a very famous passage in Bronowski's Descent of Man where he says that science is the most human of disciplines because it's the only discipline that acknowledges its own fallibility. In fact, it celebrates its own fallibility. And perhaps that is the difference. What Sarah was saying about the fact that it's easy to characterise science as being rather sterile and rather inhuman in a sense, whereas the other ways of looking at things are a bit more human. When in fact, what I think Bronowski was absolutely right, that in fact acknowledging your fallibility and saying that these are the things that we don't know, therefore we will say nothing about them, but we will do research, is actually the more human response.
Well, and we actively welcoming criticism. I mean, the Q&A after a work in progress seminar or a conference presentation is often a bloodbath, but it's all consensual, and in general, people don't take it personally. It's a kind of consenting intellectual S&M activity, and we know that it's good for our soul, and we welcome it, and we want it because we know that that's how we will purify our ideas.
Do you think, Sarah, that there is a problem here? Do you think we're here on Monkey Cage, the scientists lined up going, it's terrible, these people who are misrepresenting our science. Yeah. Do you think that there's a problem? You've outlined, in a sense, that there may be benefits if you've got a terminal illness, let's say, and it makes you feel better. Is there a problem, though?
I think what's so important is allowing, and it's difficult because you're scientists and this isn't what you need to allow, so it's not me. I mean, as people, that other people choose what works for them. And that doesn't mean that you guys don't set out all of the facts as clearly as you can, because that gives people the option all the time. And that's the fairest and best thing you can do. Do you need to argue with them? Do you guys need to go and stand outside with placards outside a homeopathic clinic? No.
Well, but actually, I mean, what I think is actually quite gracious about most of the quack-busting activity in the UK, at any rate, is that, for the most part, it's about principles rather than people. Mm. And actually, I'm not a consumer journalist. Like, I don't want to stop people going to see quacks. I'm actually not bothered by that. I find it more interesting than I do dangerous. And I think it's really interesting because the fact that people buy into this stuff, spend money on it, but also spend time and invest emotional energy in it, is really interesting because it tells us a lot about the role of science and medicine in culture and the challenges that we have to meet in explaining medicine better. But I don't think I actually want to stop people doing it because I kind of find it more interesting than dreadful.
There's also a lot of books in it. If they stop doing it, that's the end of your book career, isn't it? What are you going to write?
Good science is not going to
I've got other fish to fry.
So we asked the audience a question as well. Particles can be entangled with each other. We are made of particles. Therefore, we must be entangled with each other. So, who would you like to have a three-legged race with and why? Please show working out. So, what have we got?
Kylie Minogue, because she called me her mini-me.
What?
Someone said that?
How small must someone be to be the mini-me of Kylie Minogue?
Well, only Kylie Minogue in here somewhere.
Schrodinger's cat, we'd be at the beginning and the end at the same time, as long as no one looked. The Emily J. The surfer, Laird Hamilton, he'd always be ahead when the waveform collapses. I felt that deserved more, but it's been a long recording.
Angelina Jolie, why worry about winning the race?
Saucy. So, Brian Cox, because his hair is so perfect, he could never become entangled, but it's so loose as well. He'd go through. He had his old hair stolen at Christmas. Anyway, so the...
He's decided, Robin's now decided that I have a wig.
I think it is. Because your face is very smooth. Because there was a quote that we saw, which was all about... In I think, one of the books about... What was it? There's a book which is all about using quantum to defy ageing. And I thought, what a load of rubbish. And then I looked at you and I thought, he does look young, doesn't he? And it's where he works. That's his area, isn't it? So, thank you very much to our guests, Sarah Pascoe, Jeff Forshaw and Ben Goldacre. Next week, we are discussing what's the point of plants. Yeah, I know, but I don't know where we came up with that subject. Let's get rid of the plants, says Radio 4. Angry caps lock emails arrive. Thank you very much for listening, and goodbye.
In the infinite monkey cage, the naughty monkey. In the infinite monkey cage, without your trousers. In the infinite monkey cage. Turned out nice again.
Welcome to the Infinite Monkey Cage podcast with me, Brian Cox.
And I'm Robin Ince.
And if you'd like to complain about this programme after listening to it, write to the BBC Broadcasting House, London W1A1AA.
Why not complain about it before listening to it? It will save time. I hope you enjoy the podcast. Hello, I'm Robin Ince, and actually those are probably the last words I'm going to say for the whole of this show.
Yeah, because today's show is all about quantum mechanics, and Robin actually, well, he doesn't have a clue.
No, I don't. Though apparently, in another world, I made some different choices when I was younger, and I do have a very deep understanding of quantum mechanics, wave functions, Hermitian operators, and Hilbert space.
Hermitian operators, Robin, what are they then?
I don't know. Though I do think that very briefly I took a quantum leap, and when I first said Hermitian operators, I was someone who knew what they were, but now I've made a quantum leap back again, like Deepak says, and again I'm ignorant.
Anyway, today, we, by which I mean me and the panel, will be discussing quantum mechanics. What is quantum theory? What, if anything, does it tell us about the nature of the physical world? And could it shed light upon deep questions about the nature of space and time and the origin, or otherwise, of the universe?
Today, we are joined by three wave functions that have, with all probability, collapsed into our...
Not right.
Right. I know it's technically wrong, but you can teach them, and there's money in that. There'll probably be another book contract if you're lucky. Anyway, our guests are...
Hello, I'm Jamal Khalili. I'm a professor of physics at the University of Surrey. And what I find most intriguing about quantum mechanics is that after almost 100 years of this most powerful theory in all of science, we still can't agree on what it means.
I'm Sean Carroll. I'm a physicist at Caltech in Pasadena, California. What I find most intriguing about quantum mechanics is that I wrote a whole book explaining it in perfectly understandable terms, and Robin was just telling me 5 minutes ago that he read the book and is now saying he knows nothing about quantum mechanics. Which reflects the fact that not only people on the street, but even physicists, as Jim is alluding to, have failed in their job of understanding quantum mechanics, despite it being the most important thing we know about the universe.
I'm Katie Brand. I'm a writer and comedian, and the thing I find most intriguing and exciting about quantum mechanics is that in a many worlds theory, it means there must be another universe in which Piers Morgan is functionally illiterate and therefore can never write another word again.
And this is our panel! Katie, if you read Sean's book, you'll find there's bad news on that Piers Morgan possibility.
No, really?
But Sean, we will start with you, and I know this is the idea of this bit. This may be the only question that gets asked all night. This might just be your show, because to give people some sense of what is quantum mechanics.
Yeah. Of course, we argue about what is quantum mechanics. We don't have the final answer. But functionally, the reason why quantum mechanics is hard is because it says that what you see when you look at things is fundamentally different than what they are when you're not looking at them. And this is a feature of quantum mechanics that is not shared by any other theory. An electron, what we call a particle, you can see little pictures of an electron moving through a chamber, and there's a line as if it's a particle, and we call it a particle, and then they say, but when you're not looking at it, it is a cloud that spreads out all throughout space. That's the fundamental mystery of quantum mechanics.
Can I ask a question?
Can she ask a question?
Yeah,
is that allowed?
Just something I just... does this apply to all electrons of everything, or is this just sort of special, magical, crazy electrons?
This applies not only to all electrons, but to all of everything.
Okay.
In fact, the reason why Robin was getting in trouble by saying there are three different wave functions, that there is only one wave function of the entire universe.
And I told him that. When
I
we
know,
wrote the
you told him,
script.
but you know... And we are all entangled within that wave function, which makes us only see a tiny, tiny sliver of reality.
See, that is why today's show is brought to you by Codeine, because this is... It's such a beautiful, and I loved your book because the word glimmers of light, where you just, but it is, in terms of its practicality and its pragmatic idea, and it just, because it's this kind of idea that it's a universe of cheeky particles. You know, I see it as more of a kind of slapstick thing that, you know, you're looking at it, it's going, I'm particle, I'm fine, I'm just over here, and then you look away, go, they're not looking, I'm everywhere, they're looking again, I'm just over here. Yeah. And that's a hard, you know, my Three Stooges version of quantum mechanics, I hope it helps.
Is it like the Laurel and Hardy thing where they're going in and out of doors on a train station? It's like that.
Yes, that's what I see. Yeah, the double piano experiment. One is going up a hill, one is not going up a hill. That's a whole. But
this is why it is so hard for even professional physicists to really quite come to terms with it, because if you see a particle there, and then the equations are telling you, but no, it's really a spread out wave when you're not looking, everyone in the world will think, but it's really a particle. Like, I don't really believe this. And there's this huge mental block to accepting what the scientific evidence is trying to tell you.
Well, Jim, I think if everyone's heard something about quantum mechanics, it's probably Schrödinger's cat, which is an idea which I think does encapsulate a lot of the strangeness, a lot of the subjects we want to talk about. So could you give us not the 1 minute, but the 3 or 4 minute introduction to Schrödinger's cat experiment?
Yeah, so, I mean, quantum mechanics is interesting because unlike the other great theory in physics of the 20th century, Einstein's theory of relativity, which we attribute quite rightly to Einstein, one scientist, quantum mechanics was developed by lots of physicists, mainly in the 1920s. And Erwin Schrödinger, Austrian physicist, was one of the people who contributed. He came up with an equation which is named after him. Schrödinger's equation is the thing that you learn when you study physics or chemistry at university. Solving that equation tells you about how atoms behave and how electrons move within atoms and so on. But Schrödinger, despite being this, one of the founders of quantum mechanics, was one of the people, actually along with Einstein as well, who was uneasy about what it told us about the universe. And in the mid-1930s, he came up with this, what's called a thought experiment of putting a cat in a box. So, this is popular culture now. We're talking about cats being dead and alive and it's cruelty to cats. Schrödinger never actually put a cat in a box. It was something that he came up with to try and show just how crazy quantum mechanics was and his discomfort with it. So you see, if you have put a cat in a box together with some poison in a jar, which is triggered by the release of a radioactive atom. So an atom that its nucleus spits out a particle, an alpha particle. That particle triggers a Geiger counter, which then triggers a hammer that hits the glass, releases the poison and kills the cat. Right. Now, he said, what if you had that box closed for, let's say, an hour? Within that hour, there's a 50-50 chance that atom would have spat out this alpha particle. That means there's a 50-50 chance the cat would be killed by the time you open the box an hour later. He said, but because the atom and the radioactive particle are described by quantum mechanics, you cannot say at any one time whether it has spat out the particle or not. You have to describe it as this wave function, this mathematical abstract entity which says the particle has both been emitted and not emitted at the same time. And he said, well, okay, while we're quite happy to talk about things like that happening down at the level of atoms, we're talking about cats here. And if the fate of the cat is now intertwined with the atom, then the cat must also be dead and alive at the same time until you open the box. And he was highlighting how uncomfortable he was with quantum mechanics, because that's crazy. You never open the box and see dead and alive cats at the same time. So that led to this whole philosophy of people arguing over decades. Is it the experimenter who opens the box that forces the cat to decide whether it's dead or alive? This is called a quantum measurement. How can you qualify to make a quantum measurement? Do you have to have a PhD? Do you have to wear a lab coat? Can the cat decide for itself? What if you put Schrödinger in the box and see how he likes it? You open the box, I was feeling a bit half dead and half alive. Thank you very much. You've collapsed me to the live state. And the thing about quantum mechanics is that we still can't decide for sure exactly the narrative, the story that goes along with the maths that predicts cats should be dead and alive at the same time.
Surely all this could be solved by just not putting a lid on the box, though. And then you can just see.
Well, yes. You could, yeah,
oh,
absolutely.
The cat's fine.
Yeah.
Oh, no, it's dead.
Yeah, you would be able to see it. Then you would either be dead or alive. But the thing is, you think, well, okay, so you don't know if it's dead or alive. Well, that's just your ignorance. It's like not knowing, what you've got for Christmas until you unwrap your present. But quantum mechanics says it's more than that. It's not just the state of our knowledge, where the cat is either dead or alive, we don't know. Strictly speaking, it says it is both dead and alive until you open the box. And we're going to talk about different ways of getting around this issue.
As you've just found out also about what Jim gave his children for Christmas. 50% of them got a live pet, 50% got a dead pet. He doesn't have favourites, it's just the way it worked out.
This is actually an opportunity for Robin to do an impression, because it's called a linear superposition. And everybody accepts the facts that the description of an atomic nucleus that decays will be what's called a linear superposition, both, as Jim said, decayed and not decayed until you observe it. Well, maybe not. We're going to talk about that, but linear superposition. But it's Robin's favourite Brian Blessed impression.
Oh, yeah. When we had Brian Blessed on, and he said, I'm sure many of you know about this, but he said, I have to say Gordon's alive, right? We said, no, you can't just say Gordon's alive. So we wrote him a little script, which was Schrodinger's Flash Gordon. And so the first one on the show, he just went, Gordon's alive and dead. He's in a superposition. What was lovely about it was that break-in. He's in a superposition. It was a proper, actually, what kind of position? Super! Absolutely super. That was. But I know, that idea is, it's such an. But I also love the rhythm in which you told the story of, spit out the particle that broke the. It sounded like you were doing There Was an Old Woman Who Swallowed a Fly. Which kind of, she swallowed Pavlov's dog to Schrodinger's cat.
I'm now thinking about superposition in a different light. It's like a really excellent position.
So, Sean, what are the different interpretations of what Jim just described? I suppose at some level, every undergraduate physicist accepts the fact that you can have this description of a nucleus, but then it sounds absurd when you extend that description to a cat.
Yeah, and this was exactly Schrodinger's point. I mean, his point was not to say, look how weird quantum mechanics is. His point was to say, surely you don't believe that cats are neither alive or dead. They're in superpositions of both. But those are the rules that we teach our undergraduates, that things are in superpositions until we measure them. And then all the questions that Jim asks, what do you mean measure? Like, who counts as a measurement? What if I just glance at it? Does that really count? None of those are answered by the traditional textbook way of presenting quantum mechanics. So happily, we have better positions now that we can take. My favorite one, which I'm sure we'll get to, is called the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics. Hugh Everett, who's a graduate student, invented it. There's a long tradition in quantum mechanics of inventing a sensible way of thinking about it and then being kicked out of the field. So Everett left physics after doing this. He said, what happens is the two possibilities, you open the box and the cat's alive, or you open the box and you see the cat dead, they're both real, but they're real in two separate universes. When that quantum mechanical system becomes entangled with the rest of the world branches into two possibilities. And in fact, that's what Schrodinger's equation says happens. It's not a new thing that Everett invented. It's right there in the equation. It's just hard to believe because you never feel like you've branched or you've appeared into two different worlds. So that's where the philosophy comes in. Other people, like Roger Penrose, has said, well, when the system becomes big enough, its wave function just can't take it anymore and it collapses somewhere. So a nucleus can be in a superposition, but a cat just can't be. Other people have said, well, there's a wave function, but there's more to reality than that. David Bohm famously said there's hidden variables that we don't know about that actually the cat is either only alive or dead. We just have no way of predicting it. So then we kicked him out. He moved to Brazil. It's a long story. But these are not different interpretations. These are different physical theories with potentially different experimental consequences. I think that the idea that we should think of these as interpretations is an old-fashioned one, and we can do better now.
We should just a definition, because we use the word wave function several times.
Yes.
So could you define wave function?
So, I mean, it's what the thing really is. And it's not that weird. Like, I like to think about a pen. We're doing another visual aid on radio again. Sorry about that. But I can hold a pen vertically. No one's surprised about that. I can hold it horizontally. No one's surprised about that. I can also hold it at any angle. Again, no one's surprised about that. That's not the surprising thing. The surprising thing is that imagine a pen that when you looked at it, it was only ever seen to be either horizontal or vertical. That would be weird, right? And that's the world that quantum mechanics gives us. The set of possibilities of the pen being at any angle, that's what the wave function describes. The cat being alive is like a horizontal pen. The cat being dead is like a vertical pen. The wave function is just the collection of all these different possible measurement outcomes in some combination.
Katie, what's your...
I felt a genuine sort of ripple of terror when you said my name then. I'm literally just processing this. Yes. Does the cat know it's dead? That's what I want to know.
But what is your general... this is not a subject like me. It's not something you're immersed in. When you start to hear these ideas, I think it's one of the hardest things. It is so counterinstinctual. It is dealing on a scale that... So in the first 15 minutes of this show, can you take us through your emotional arc?
Your quantum roller coaster.
Yes, intimidation, terror, a sort of glib euphoria at the idea that I might have solved this by the end of the recording, the crushing knowledge that I won't. I don't know, I just sort of feel like I'm trying to grapple with things that I understand, and the thing that I've come up with is calories. In the sense that I feel like calories are different whether they're observed or unobserved. They behave differently in different circumstances. So, for example, anything you eat at a wedding doesn't have any calories in it. Anything you eat in the company of someone who's slightly bigger than you doesn't have any calories in it. Anything you eat on a plane. If you eat crisps and you're really, really hungry and you haven't had any tea, they don't have any calories in them. Whereas, in normal life, they do. So I think that's the only way I can... Or bank statements. I feel like whenever I get a bank statement, I feel like before I open this... I could be, or I could be massively overdrawn again, the moment of not opening it, and usually I don't open them for that very reason, and that's why I believe I'm much richer than I am, and constantly on the run. So I'm sort of grappling with sort of small, banal things that I could perhaps sort of relate this to, but, I do find this really genuinely fascinating, and I've talked before on this show about my atrocious science teaching at school, and particularly my physics teacher, Mr. Potiphar, who kind of sort of smelt as an interesting sort of mingling of vodka and extra strong mints.
Can I just check, is he likely to be listening? Is he still around?
I think it's highly unlikely that he's still around, or maybe he is. If there is a Schrodinger's Potiphar, it will be the only contribution to physics the man has ever made.
What I like is that in one world, he's having the extra strong mints to cover up the taste of the smell of vodka. In the other, he's trying to cover up the extra strong mints by drinking a load of vodka. So there's very different takes there on
Yes, and I still don't know which one I was in. I find it's it's so totally fascinating, as I'm sure everyone here feels, and we're just trying to grapple to understand it. And what it always boils down to with me is, does it mean time travel's possible or not? Does it mean there's parallel universes or not? Because those two things I find very, very exciting. I felt a sort of frisson of activity over there.
You asked, the first thing you said, actually, it's an interesting question, which is you said, does the cat know it's alive?
Well, I was
or dead?
jotting down things about what is reality. I know that's a big part of this. And are we the only people looking? Does it all come down? Is there someone else looking? Is there some other element that's looking? And the reality of the actual objective reality of the cat for the cat itself. So I'm glad you thought that was interesting. And now please tell me why.
Because the cat could be, the cat, it doesn't have to be a cat. It could be you, as you said. It could be Schrodinger. So what can we explore that a bit? If it's a person in the box, let's say, what is the person experiencing?
I mean, when I was taught quantum mechanics, and maybe I should say something about the standard view, is called the Copenhagen interpretation. The idea was that, if a measurement, which is how you decide whether or not the cat is dead or alive, if a measurement is made and recorded such that at some other point you can go and check, then that's it. That has so-called collapsed the state of the cat, so it is either dead or alive. So the cat can measure itself.
That's still taught in undergraduate
courses.
I mean,
I think someone in a box, you could say, make a little mark every time you are aware that you're alive.
Yeah.
And then you could somehow, then when you open the lid, if they died...
You can go back and figure out exactly when it happened.
They died.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But
Have we solved it then?
Pretty much. The problem is that, we were talking about this earlier, that, we are of a generation, Sean, Brian and I, of a generation where we were taught quantum mechanics by people who were taught quantum mechanics by the masters, so probably second or third generation. And the masters, the people who really laid out the maths of the theory weren't people like Schrödinger. They were people like Niels Bohr, the Danish physicist, and Werner Heisenberg, Wolfgang Pauli. And their view was that all this chat about what exactly is going on is a waste of time. That it's, if you're going to worry about how the cat can be dead and alive at the same time, go and do philosophy. We're physicists. But it developed into this, what's called an instrumentalist view, that all we care about is the results of measurements. Making predictions. And quantum mechanics is brilliant at that. Without quantum mechanics, we wouldn't have most of physics and chemistry. We wouldn't have learned so much about the universe. So it works. The maths works. But physicists, until recently, haven't really been that interested in what it all means. It's only now that we're starting to say, hang on a minute, enough's enough. We've had it for nearly a century. It's about time we made a decision about what's going on. So Sean's point about what is the story? Are there many worlds or not? Or is there something else going on? we should be able to come up with a way of testing what is the correct picture of reality.
Because that's what I was interested in one of the things you say in your book, which is for so long, quantum mechanics was considered, and perhaps to some extent even now, a bit of an embarrassment to study as a professional physicist.
Oh, yeah.
That for a very long period, it's like, the whole shut up and calculate thing, which is a misquote as well. I can't remember if it's in your book or not, is it David
Mermin?
Mermin, yeah. He actually said, shut up and calculate, but I won't shut up. Which is a totally different, kind of statement. It's saying, but that moment, and you talk about, I think, trying to get a grant, and someone saying, don't mention the quantum mechanics stuff.
Oh, yeah.
So why? Why? I mean, you talk about philosophers seem to engage with this, physicists very wary of it.
I think there's a lot of reasons. I mean, one was just the immense personal charisma of Niels Bohr. Like, he was the godfather of quantum mechanics, and he declared it finished. And even people like Einstein and Schrödinger said, wait, that doesn't sound right. And they lost the PR battle very thoroughly. But there's a bunch of things going on. If you think about when were these discussions being had, the 1930s and 40s. And guess what? Physicists came up with other things to be interested in those years, right? And they're developed, and the center of gravity of physics moved from Europe to the United States. Europeans, bless their hearts, like to think about philosophical topics. Americans just want to build stuff, right? And it hurt the science because there's this attitude developed that there are scientific questions where we can write down the equations and make predictions, and that's good and solid and respectable and true. And then there's this, but what does it mean, which is kind of fuzzy, and you're talking about your feelings, and we shouldn't let that into the scientific discourse. And that has meant that 90 years later, we still don't know what we're talking about when we talk about quantum mechanics.
We should, I think, drill down into this. You mentioned the many worlds interpretation. So we've mentioned this idea of, led by Niels Bohr, the Copenhagen interpretation, that there is a reality there, which is the reality that we understand and perceive, really, that we're comfortable with. And then there's, as you mentioned, this other interpretation where if it were, let's say it were me in the box, then there would be, in reality, two versions of me. The universe would have split. And there would be one in which I was dead, I wasn't there anymore, and there's one in which I would be alive. And that is so the question is, could you elaborate on that? Because it sounds so bizarre that there are multiple copies of us, not only in some sense, but really in this description of the universe.
Yeah, it's really true. And Schrödinger's equation is perfectly clear on what happens, and no one disagrees on what the equation says. The question is, are you willing to consider yourself as a quantum mechanical system? You say, sure, there's little particle is a quantum mechanical system. Maybe the cat, I don't know, is that classical or quantum? But surely I obey the rules of classical mechanics. And Everett, after a sherry-fueled night of speculation, said, look, I'm made of atoms. Atoms obey the rules of quantum mechanics. I obey the rules of quantum mechanics. So if the atom can be in a superposition of I decayed and I didn't decay, or if the cat can be in a superposition of I'm alive or I'm dead, then I, Hugh Everett, and by extension every other person, can be in a superposition of I saw the atom decay and I didn't see the atom decay. The only question is, can you believe it? Can you bring yourself to accept that many, 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 many times per second, the entire universe is duplicating into multiple copies where things are just a little bit different?
Does this go out now, like to the point where you could argue that the universe both exists and doesn't exist at the same time?
Nope. You can argue that there's more than one universe that exists.
Okay.
They all exist. That's the thing. It's all there. It exists. Deal with it.
Okay.
Yeah.
We should discuss this because it does sound unbelievably sort of a profligate sort of interpretation of a theory that in order to make the mathematics, keep the mathematics simple, let's say, keep the theory as mathematically elegant and concise as it could be, you allow the existence, literal existence of essentially an infinite number of universes, 2 trillion galaxies and billions of copies of each of us, countless billions. That does sound unusual.
It certainly is unusual, yes. But again, as you seem to admit,
This is the equivalent of a physicist brawl, by the way.
Yeah.
This is like a bar brawl.
We'll be bringing out the blackboard soon. Really get down
I happen to share this view, actually.
It's actually a very good question. We shouldn't make fun of it. But the math says this is true. The simplest, prettiest, most austere, pure, unadulterated version of the math says, yeah, billions, maybe an infinite number of universes. Deal with it, right? And so you have a choice. You can say, well, that math is really gorgeous and compelling and it explains what I see. Therefore, even though it implies the existence of many, many copies of myself just slightly different, I'm going to believe it because what I want out of physics or out of science is the simplest understanding of the underlying laws of nature. Or you can say, no. I mean, come on, catch your breath. There's stuff around us. There's a table, there's water, there's this stuff. That's what matters to me, not pretty math. What I want is the version of physics that sticks closest to what I see. I would like physics that explains one copy of all this stuff. So do you ugly up the math to stick closer to what you see? Or do you accept that what you see is a tiny sliver of reality to stick with prettier math? I'm on the side of prettier math. That's my
Well, because of the society we live in, we'll just put it to a vote, and whatever the audience decides will be
a referendum, you would say? That goes so well.
Well, members of the jury, the case against many worlds theory. And Sean is very persuasive, and I've read Sean's book, and I have to say I'm not as averse to many worlds as I was before reading Sean's book.
It's the truth that is persuasive. I am merely its mouthpiece.
First of all, I mean, I think we have to say...
A jump away from a kind of credit card hotline where you can donate to the work of the great physicist, and your bountiful donation will be revisited on you 1,000,000 times more in the other universes.
Well, this is why Jeremy Kyle's been cancelled, and we thought, well, ITV, what about a more evidence-based feud show?
I'm going to ask Katie to give us the 1 minute discourse on truth in a minute, but yes, no, I'm going to say...
Come back to me, good.
They'll cut all my bit out, Jim, don't worry about it.
No, it's true. I mean, but the maths doesn't tell us that there are many worlds. It's true the simplest interpretation of the maths, this is the most elegant, simple way of explaining, giving a narrative, a story to what's going on. But, you know, if you're going for the simplest explanation of reality, you just say, well, God made it that way. End of discussion. So it's not always the simplest that is the correct one. So we're still struggling to find that experiment that can discriminate, because nature has to work one way or the other. Either there are many universes or there aren't. You know, we have to be clever enough to find a way of picking out the correct way nature behaves.
Welcome to Infinite Monkey Roast Battle. I'm Jimmy Carr.
I was, for someone who isn't gifted at maths or went to a convent school, for example, and wasn't taught any maths till they were about 8, for example, who just did art and Jesus, when you say, like, oh, the maths is really pretty, so therefore that compels me to believe in the many worlds theory, or to say, oh, well, there's something in me because I'm ignorant of these things, that just, you sort of want to go, well, just make some more maths then, or get some more maths, or get better at maths, or do different maths. Yep. Like, what is it? I know how I sound, but broken Britain. But but what is it about this maths that is so compelling and pretty and beautiful? If you're able to verbalise that, I know it's obviously you want to write an equation and say, look how beautiful that is, but it'll just look like any other equation to me.
Sure.
So to someone like me, what is it that's so compelling about this maths that leads you to such an extraordinary conclusion?
Yeah. So I mean, if you were Isaac Newton, or back in Isaac Newton's day, and you said, well, what is the story about physics? How does it work? You would say, well, there's the universe, the state of the universe. There's a bunch of particles, and I could tell you the position of every particle and the velocity of every particle. And then there are the laws of physics, and the laws of physics chunk the universe forward in time, and they say if you start here, here's where the bowling ball flies, etc. If you go with quantum mechanics, all that's replaced, but the same basic pattern is there. There's a state of the universe. It's the wave function that we talked about, right? And then there's an equation that says how it goes. There's the Schrödinger equation, which we already talked about. And then the point is that many worlds, Hugh Everett's great insight is simply the words, and that's all. He stops there. He says, if you just buy into that, everything else follows as long as you're willing to accept these multiple universes. Every other version of quantum mechanics still has a wave function and Schrödinger's equation, and then a bunch of extra stuff. And the extra stuff is designed to get rid of the other worlds because we don't want to deal with them.
Because it's sort of philosophically jarring.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, as the philosopher David Lewis once said, I do not know how to refute an incredulous stare. And most of the objections to many worlds are less like, I don't get that. I don't believe it, right? Like, it's not like here's where it disagrees with experiment. Here's why, it's inconsistent. It's just like, all those worlds. And that's not really an argument. And so the reason why it's fairly uncontroversial to say that the math of many worlds is prettier is that literally it's the same math as everybody else, but everybody else adds worse things to sort of break away the other universes.
So it gets clunky.
It clearly
just
gets clunkier.
Just to avoid many worlds, which
That's right.
feels a bit radical.
Yeah.
Can we, so if it's possible, dig even deeper into this subject? Because if this thing is all there is, it is the deepest description of reality, then the things that we're very familiar with, in particular space and time, must in some sense emerge from this theory. They're not fundamental in such approaches. So could you describe, this is now cutting edge physics, but how we're beginning to try and extract these notions of just simple things like space and ask the question, what is time? This question that's been asked forever, I suppose. How are we beginning to approach that?
Yeah, the best, most highly trained physicists in the world still, even though they understand quantum mechanics is right, there's a classical intuition that it's hard to shake. So typically when we build a quantum mechanical model of some feature of the world, we start with a classical model and we quantize it. This is what we're taught to do. So here's space, here are glasses and pens and tables and things. We're going to quantize all of that. But presumably, reality doesn't do that. Reality just is quantum mechanical from the start. So what we should be saying is, well, what is reality? Quantum mechanics says it's a wave function. And then you say, well, why do wave functions look like tables and glasses and bottles and all that stuff? So here's a simple idea. You notice that, two things bump into each other when they're at the same point in space. And when they're not, they don't. It's a feature of reality. So let's wind that one backwards and say, when two things bump into each other, we define that to be they're at the same point in space. And so you ask, in the quantum mechanical wave function, what does it mean to bump into something? And can we build that up into a picture of a three-dimensional space? And the answer is very plausibly yes, but this is exactly what we're trying to do these days.
See that we're very near the end. Sorry, Jim, did you want to?
Oh, I was going to say one of the, people probably are aware that the holy grail of physics is to find this so-called theory of everything, which brings together quantum mechanics with Einstein's theory of relativity. Einstein's theory of relativity tells us about the meaning of space and time. Quantum mechanics talks about the world of the very small. And it's because we've failed to combine those two theories together, looking for what's called a theory of quantum gravity, that has led now to people thinking, well, maybe we have to rethink things from scratch. Which one of those theories is the more fundamental? And I guess probably most theoretical physicists would now say quantum mechanics is, and therefore Einstein's theory, heaven forbid, Einstein's theory of relativity may have to be modified to fit into quantum mechanics. And that's why these ideas about the foundations of quantum mechanics, the sort of stuff we're talking about, what it all means, is actually more important than just philosophy. That it actually might have a bearing on finding this theory of everything that we've been looking for so long.
Sorry, I was going to say that's exactly right. And despite the fact that most physicists think that quantum mechanics is more fundamental than space-time and general relativity, when it comes to reconciling them, they say, let's quantize gravity, which means let's start with Einstein's general relativity and try to make it look more quantum. What we should be doing is trying to find general relativity, gravity, space-time within quantum mechanics. And we've just started to try to do that, and it seems kind of promising.
What would such a theory tell us about the deepest question of all, which is why is there anything at all? How did the universe begin? Did the universe have a beginning? If we were to achieve such a synthesis, what would it be able to tell us, be capable of telling us about those questions, about origins, for example?
Can I just say that I find it delightful that when we just got the signal saying time's up, that you decided to ask a question which could simply be summed up as, why is there something rather than nothing? Which has ended up being but it's a good question.
Yeah, and I said it in the introduction, so we've got to get to it. Otherwise people will feel shortchanged.
You've obviously never listened to this show before. Oh my God, the tangents we go off to.
if we really knew how gravity came from quantum mechanics, we would be able to answer the question of whether there was a beginning or not. There's no time ever in the history of physics, past, present, or future, when physics will tell you why the universe exists rather than not.
If you develop a theory of everything, and I'm assuming it's going to be a combination of you three.
It's one of us.
Yes.
No, Robin.
Four. Sorry, Robin.
Thank
sorry.
you. I've been doing this show for 120 episodes. I've been listening.
If there was, if you were to be able to develop this sort of theory of everything, what would it mean for just sort of us normal kind of muggles? What would you do with it? How would life change? How would you change, or how would everything change?
I'd feel very satisfied. Does that count?
We used to do theology at university.
I did, yes.
So if, for example, it is shown, so through doing physics, that the universe is eternal, for example, does not have a beginning in time, what would that mean? You asked the question, but what would it mean to you? What do you think it would mean to people who think about religion if you showed that the universe, in fact, is eternal?
As in, there was no point at which the universe didn't exist, and therefore there can't really be a creator.
Yeah. Well, does that follow? That's my
well,
question.
I'm not now religious, and in fact, I became an atheist on a pilgrimage to Rome.
How are we supposed to work?
Yes, and I did meet the Pope at the end, and it felt like the closer I got to the Pope, the more atheist I became. Is what I originally. So it was embarrassing when I did finally meet him. But all right, so I can't answer from a personal point of view because I would just find it very exciting because I'm now an atheist, and I would just find it fascinating because I find all of this fascinating. But I do think a lot of Christians have tried to combine science or the idea of evolution with the idea of guided evolution, and that all of these scientific discoveries have been kind of folded into religion for the more open-minded or intellectual, perhaps, people who have religious beliefs. So personally, I would think that what would happen, I'm sorry to disappoint anyone who's a very militant atheist, is that religious people would simply find a way to fold that into their existing story. And I think probably a lot of humans would be comforted by that. But I think it's hard to know, because what I'm trying to understand is how radical would it be for humans, just sort of at a lay person's level like me, if you did discover the theory of everything? Or would it just be sort of felt to be a kind of another layer of very complicated physics that most people don't really engage with? Or would it be sort of front page news, like as if an alien had landed in someone's back garden in Richmond?
But I think a theory of everything, we don't know. Physics for hundreds of years has been on this quest to unify, to simplify, to find overarching descriptions of nature, of reality. And we don't know, so when Faraday and Maxwell in the 19th century combined electricity and magnetism, they couldn't predict that it was going to lead to the electric motor and radios and TVs and computers and so on. So we don't know, in our advancing knowledge of how the world works, what practical applications it would lead to. The people working on this theory of everything are not looking to take out patents on it because it's going to be useful. They just want to know the deepest secrets of nature.
I also think there's a thing, when you say front page news, when we look back, Einstein was front page news. And there were, in the 20th century, in the first half, science often was front page news. And there's still science going on that should be front page news, but unfortunately our media has decided that is not as immediately kind of tacky and sticky, and so we have that. It's all out there. So I think that's part of it as well, is to say there are brilliant and wonderful ideas, and this is far more interesting than your particular attack on, Harry and Meghan or whatever it might be.
But it's also interesting, isn't it, how Harry and Meghan can be both royal and not royal.
Mm-hmm.
Katie, I love your question, because as soon as you said it, what are the implications? My first answer is there aren't any. No frying pans, no better iPhones, no cure for malaria. But then when you develop into the question, how does it change how we think about our role in the universe? That's exactly where the implications are. And it's a set of ideas that physicists, again, are a little bit afraid of touching too closely. And it's certainly not the case that some scientific advance is going to convince everyone to disbelieve in God. But as science moves forward, for the last 500 years, the role, the set of jobs for God to have has sort of gotten smaller. And everyone has a tipping point where they go, well, okay, then I don't need it at all.
And mine was just outside the Vatican.
You're right, very close. Like, you need a lot of tipping.
Yeah.
But that leaves all this work that God had done for us in giving meaning and morality and purpose to our lives. Physics doesn't help with that, and it's not going to help with that. And so suddenly you're thrown into this situation where you sink or swim, and I think that the swimming is realizing that purpose and meaning in our lives is something that is up to us to invent, up to us to give to life. It's not handed from outside in any way. I think this is the sensible conclusion to draw from progress in science over the last 500 years. And again, it's a matter of facing up to those consequences.
We asked the audience a question, and that was Schrödinger put a cat in a box for his famous thought experiment. What would you put in a box to be simultaneously dead and alive, and why? And one of our more specific questions, I've got here, Pete Burns, because you spin my right round, baby, right round, both up and down, I presume. Yeah, so there we are. That's
listen, Grandad, it's spin me right round, but not
you.
my.
It says spin you, my right. Yes.
You know
yes,
that song?
Grandad. Yeah, you're quoting the song. I'm reading what was sent in. I respect our listeners even when they forget words.
You spin me right round.
I like the idea if you go, listen, Grandad, you don't know Dead or Alive. Many people who bought that Dead or Alive single are Granddads now.
Yeah, true. Here's one. Predictably, a strawberry to finally settle the argument. It is both dead and alive, but this is linked, that's from Sarah, linked to the next one, which says a raspberry to keep all the strawberries company. Hashtag inclusivity. Inclusivity of fruit.
This one is my career, a spectacular failure that gave me a good living. Everyone involved with the movie Cats. And if you need to ask why, you obviously haven't seen it. Thank you very much to our panel, Katie, Jim and Sean. Next week we return finally away from this philosophical whimsy that we've been dealing with to real science, because we are going to ask, what is that strange light in the sky? Is it a Chinese lantern? Is it Jupiter? Or is it an advanced extraterrestrial civilization that has travelled light years across the galaxy in search of another intelligent civilization? And when they get here, they decide that rather than have a conversation, they just find a loner, give them a quick rectal examination and then go home. What we're asking is the universe just jam-packed full of alien proctologists? That's science, Brian. Good night.
The infinite monkey cage, without your trousers. In the infinite monkey cage. Turned out nice again.
Hello, I'm Brian Cox.
I'm Robin Ince.
And I'm Jo Brandt, and this is my hostile takeover of the Infinite Monkey Cage. Actually, it wasn't very hostile because Brian and Robin were very easily overpowered.
We were. This show's going to be a little different because usually on Monkey Cage, we sit down together and we say we'd like to do a show about something that's interesting, and we have lots of fun inviting guests. But this time, we've decided that we're going to do something different.
It was actually quite frightening. It's one of the rarest moments of anything where I actually saw the physicist Brian Cox showing empathy to a guest, because it's not generally something that he's been programmed to do. So it was one of the strangest things to him suddenly just leaning forward and going, but what would you like to talk about? And I've never seen that. You even met their eye without flinching. And Joe, so I thought, oh, thank heavens, we're going to escape from physics, because Brian always goes, physics, we've got to do physics, we've got to do physics, black holes, physics. And so we went, oh, what's Joe going to come up with? Joe Brown's going to come up with. And Joe said, quantum mechanics. Which feels to me like a payola scam in the making, to be quite honest.
So, Joe, why? Why did you choose that subject?
Well, I have the absolute minimum amount of knowledge. I think it's very interesting because to me, it's not like science at all. It's kind of like thinking something up and then just saying, what about that? And people going, oh, yes, you might be right.
That's theoretical physics.
Yeah.
Don't tell anyone. We've been going away with it for decades.
And I have to say, I've tried... Who's read A Brief History of Time? 3, 4... quite a few.
I think the question, though, you change that, you go, who started A Brief History of Time?
Well, I've done that about 14 times. Not brief enough, in my opinion, that brief history of time, because like a page would have been good, but it's not, is it? So I kind of just want to learn if quantum mechanics is what I really think it is. It probably isn't.
So this is the first time we've done this on the show. So this genuinely was Joe getting in touch and saying, I want to understand quantum mechanics. Can we do an infinite monkey cage about it? To answer Joe's questions, we have two of the world's greatest experts on quantum mechanics, past, present and future, and they are...
I'm Ben Alnack. I'm Professor of Theoretical Physics at the University of Cambridge. And what's baffling me is why the particles have a strange pattern of masses.
I'm Faye Dowker. I'm Professor of Theoretical Physics at Imperial College London. I work on quantum gravity, which is a theory that doesn't exist, but I'm trying to find one. And the scientific idea that baffles me is the block universe, which is the idea that the future already exists, the future has already happened, because it baffles me because if the future's already happened, then we're all dead.
Is it any clearer?
Yeah, I think that'll do me, actually. No, I'm just getting started. That was fascinating.
And this is our panel. Joe, let's start off with, so what do you know or believe you know so far about the idea of quantum mechanics and quantum physics?
Well, I believe that quantum mechanics is a branch of physics that deals with the behaviour of matter and light on a subatomic and atomic level. And I read that in Woman's Weekly, everyone.
I would love it if Take a Break had more things. My quantum physicist husband has been having affairs in other universes. Yeah.
Well, but Ben, would you like to point out why Woman's Weekly is incorrect?
I think it's bang on the money. It's about how matter behaves on very tiny distance scales and how it interacts. It describes other forces too, all forces as far as we know, apart from gravity, importantly. So, as Brian knows, the standard model of particle physics has 3 forces in it, and they're all described by quantum theory very well. But the weird thing about quantum theory is that it's inherently probabilistic. And this is a property of the particles themselves. And that there's the Heisenberg uncertainty principle, which tells you can't know where a particle is and how fast it's going at the same time. There's like a fuzziness in its definition. And there's some probabilities that you can describe if you get the theory right, but you can't squeeze it and measure it completely accurately because it's kind of fuzzy in a weird quantum probability way. And it's modern day magic. I mean, it's totally divorced from all our experience, and yet the experiments, time and time again, tell you, this is how the way that things work.
But why does that matter, Faye? So before quantum mechanics, we have Newtonian physics and everything appears to be completely predictable in principle. Why does it bother us that we then have a theory from the 1920s onwards, I suppose, which is probabilistic? What does that mean?
It bothers some people and it doesn't bother others. I mean, famously, Einstein said that he was disturbed by the lack of predictability of the theory. The strangest thing about quantum mechanics, I mean, there are many strange things about quantum mechanics. That's one of them. But there are other ones which exhibit what is so different from our everyday expectations of how things behave. And the experiment that portrays that, which is called the double slit experiment. And in the double slit experiment, the way that a quantum particle behaves is so odd. It's not just that you can't predict what it's going to do, but that if you allow it different possibilities, then it does things that it was able to do before, but now can't do. So the double slit experiment has the following setup. So there's a metal plate with 2 holes in it, and you shoot electrons at this metal plate. And the electrons go through the plate, they travel through the experiment, and they land on a screen. So it causes a little flash of light when the electron reaches the screen. And you can do the following thing. You can block one of the slits and allow the electron to go through just one of the slits. And there will be a pattern, and you do this many, many times. So you send many, many electrons through, and you don't know where the
the electron's going to hit this scintillating screen, where the flashes of light will be. There's just some probability that it'll hit it in certain places. And over time, the electrons that hit the screen build up this pattern, and it's a roughly uniform pattern on the screen. So they could be here, they could be here, they could be here, and it's a roughly uniform pattern. But now you open the other hole, the other slit in the screen, and you let the electrons go through, again, one by one. And now there are parts of the screen that the electrons cannot reach that they were able to reach before.
Are they tired? They've had enough. They need a rest.
So what's happened is that you've given the electrons different ways to go, different paths, different histories that it could take. And just the possibility of doing different things means it changes the behaviour of the outcome.
But is that totally random? Because it sort of implies that the electrons have some sort of agency, doesn't it? It's like,
yes,
today I'm going to go to that side of the screen. Or is it just completely random that happens?
It's random in the sense that you don't know where they'll end up on the screen, but you can predict the pattern. Each electron behaves randomly, but the pattern is perfectly predictable and scientific. But the peculiar thing is that the particle cannot reach parts of the screen that it could reach when there was only one way for it to go.
Why is that, Brian?
Well, I think that it's worth appreciating. It's a beautiful way of describing it. As Faye said, you've got a possibility that's open to something. It's just a particle in the standard picture. It's a piece of grain of sand, right? You think of it like that. And it goes through a screen, a little slit, and it goes through a screen. And then you open another way that it can get there. And suddenly it can't go where it went before. That's tremendously strange. I mean, Richard Feynman's description was to picture it as going always. And if you say it takes every possible path it can, in some sense simultaneously, then you can explain what's happened. But that's weird, isn't it? You've got a particle that's doing everything it possibly can. It's like me saying to you, we'll go to Portsmouth. And
he will. He always does the first day in Portsmouth.
In some sense, we take every possible path on our way to Portsmouth.
There's only about two, actually. There's the
A3 and the A.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
But
am I allowed to ask why, or is that not feasible? Why does that happen then?
We don't know. We don't know.
Let's just find out now, just throw it out for a straw poll. Who currently now still thinks that physics is a unitary pursuit? And who's beginning to change their mind? So we've got work to do. We've got a lot of work to do on this one, I think.
If we summarise then, maybe we summarise this little bit.
Summarise what's just happened.
Well, because something a bit. So because as Faye said, it goes to the central weirdness of quantum mechanics, doesn't it? That you've got this picture of if you want to think of a particle, then you think of it as going all possible routes that it can. And that involves, I suppose, in principle, going via the Andromeda galaxy, right, in principle.
Or Portsmouth.
Anyway, or Portsmouth, on its way to the screen. You've got to take account of every possible route, haven't you? Which is, it's worth underlining, that's a picture of reality that's odd.
But is it true, I'm sure I read it somewhere, that like by the very act of observing something, you change it, or it changes its behaviour, or?
Yeah, absolutely. So before you observe the electrons in the double slits, you don't know which path, it's gone through both paths in some sense, right, through both slits. But when you observe it you measure which slit it's gone through, then it's like, oh, it's the right-hand slit. It's definitely gone through that slit. And there's a difference between those two systems before and after, and it's very counterintuitive, right? It's completely, and that's because our experience is on this larger classical world where these rules don't seem to apply to us, so we have got no experience of them.
The reason I said earlier that was it Women's Weekly? What was it? Where did you get that from? Women's Weekly. The reason I introduced it and said it might be wrong is because, well, I said it was definitively wrong actually, but the reason was that it said that this only applies to little things. And I think when you have the picture that, well, it's electrons or something, but our world, this thing that we perceive, it doesn't behave like that at all. Everybody knows which route everything takes if you throw a tennis ball and so on. But you get a real feel for how strange that theory is if you just believe it, take it at face value. If you transfer that to big things, and the famous example would be Schrodinger's cat.
So could you discuss how strange this gets if you apply the theory, and there's no reason why we shouldn't, or maybe you think we can discuss that, but if you apply the theory to something like a cat or a human.
Can I just check? So, Joe, you know about Schrodinger's cat and that idea that there's a cat in a box and it's both dead and alive until observed.
Yeah, I do know about it, but I just think it's not both dead and alive. It's just when the lid's on, you can't see it, so you don't know what it is.
See, which I think, again, is this seems to me to be, before we just move on to that I don't know if you have the same problem which I would have, which is all these things that are being talked about, we have this kind of picture theory in our brain. And so most of the things that we talk about, especially if we talk about biology, for instance, you're normally able to picture most of the different kind of ideas within it. But when we get to this idea of the behaviour of particles, actually
do you think we don't have the right language to describe it?
Yeah.
So let's describe a cat.
So the Schrodinger's cat's the thought experiment has actually done this, thankfully. But you put a radioactively decaying source, like an atom, in a box, and if the radiation comes out, which it only happens, randomly, it's a quantum process, radioactive decay, so we know that, so it comes out at random time, then it would hit a poison vial and kill the cat, okay? So whether the poison vial has been hit or not is decided by quantum physics, and so whether the cat is dead or alive is defined by the quantum state. So before you observe it, indeed, it should be in a quantum state of being, half probability dead, but not just half dead, but I mean like completely dead with half the probability, or completely alive with half probability. And then when you open it, you collapse the wave function, it's called, into one of the different states. So you find out whether it's dead or alive. And if you put the lid back on, and then have a look again, of course, if it's dead initially, it will stay dead. But I think Schrodinger was teasing at the difficulty with it, because the cat is a macroscopic object, it's a big object. Big objects, as far as our experience tells us, don't live by these quantum laws, and yet here's a system you could set up where it should live by a quantum law. So what's going on? I don't know.
But is the cat the observer, though? Wouldn't also the cat be the observer? Because they are. They look around a lot, don't they? They're very. That's what I'm just wondering. What if we've put a cat in there? It's looking as well.
I kind of feel that the RSPCA should be the observer.
So, this is the textbook version of quantum mechanics that we teach our students. We do teach them that you apply quantum mechanics to a quantum system, and it's in a quantum state, which might be in this so-called superposition of two different states. It's in that superposition until you make a measurement, and then the act of measuring changes the system and collapses the quantum system into, say, one or other of these states. What the textbook theory of quantum mechanics does not tell us is what qualifies anyone or anything or any other system to be the observer. Just leaves all of that completely open. The concept of measurement is really central to the theory. The concept of observer is really central to the theory. Everything hangs on it, but the theory is utterly silent about what that is. So it just leaves you up to your own good taste and intuition to make this division between the quantum system that we describe using quantum mechanics and quantum states and superpositions and wave-particle duality, and the rest, that is us, with our lab equipment and whatever. So you can, if you want, consider the cat to be an observer, but nothing tells you that that's right or wrong. That's the weird thing. It's really completely missing that crucial ingredient.
But then again, doesn't that give you such a multitude of choices that you could choose the cat to be the observer? I mean, to me, an observer is a bloke in a white coat with a clipboard, right? But you were saying, like, the slit could be the observer. Did you say that earlier on?
If you had an extra measurement device on the slit that was...
Oh, I see. But it doesn't need to be a human. But it can be a human.
No,
or can it not be a human?
I mean, personally, I don't think it... Faith, I completely agree that the observer isn't defined. But it seems to me, it seems to be when you've got large organized systems of quantum systems that are all piled on top of each other. For example, lab equipment is macroscopic. It's not a tiny thing.
Yeah.
It seems to be when they interact and with those big systems that there's a collapse. And so you would call a big system like a cat, perhaps that would be an observer in that case. Yeah.
I love the idea of calling a cat a big system. The idea of going into a pet shop. What size of system would you like? I mean, I don't know if you have this, Joe. There is a point when I listen, and I know that, I've read books on this, but there is, again, that kind of thinking of cats, that moment where your brain goes into the Homer Simpson kind of meow, 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 meow. Because you're trying to create so many pictures and you can't come up with, and that, I think, is where you feel that kind of moment where the floor underneath you is beginning to disappear.
Absolutely. I mean, I'm kind of slightly feeling like I've been given drugs at the moment because I can't quite grasp. Well, I grasp it for a second and then it just goes away, and I'm not sure I've even understood it really.
That's the right feeling, though. There is. No,
I'm an expert! Hooray!
In the sense that there is no consensus. There's no scientific consensus on the picture that you should have of what is going on in a quantum system. There are different interpretations. People favour them over the other, but we cannot tell you what is going on inside the box. So you say, here's my quantum system, it's in this box. There's no description of what that system is doing in the box. We don't have that. That's the exciting and wonderful thing. That's the thing I enthuse my students about. I say, I'm going to teach you this thing, but there's something missing from it, which is you have to take on board that there's this fundamental concept of measurement, of observation, which is crucial to the theory because it's useless without it, because the theory only gives you predictions for results of observations and measurements. So it's absolutely crucial. But theory doesn't tell you what it is. And if you want to apply it to the whole universe, it then becomes silent.
I mean, what would you say is the percentage of sort of traditional scientists who just feel they need to lie down after they hear something like what you said, and people who can kind of be, I don't know, sort of loose enough to sort of take on board that there's all these competing ways of looking at stuff and are happy to go ahead with that? Because for most people, science is about facts and about proving them, isn't it? But it sounds to me like you can't really you've got a missing grey area where you can't prove anything. Because is it because you don't know enough, or is it because you don't think it's ever going to be,
It's difficult to find experiments that can discriminate between one interpretation and another one. For example, many worlds quantum mechanics, which is quite an extreme interpretation. But the philosophy is important, and the metaphysics of, what really does it mean? I think it's fascinating, and it fascinates all of us probably, even though we don't know the answers.
Could you just, you mentioned the many worlds interpretation. Before we move on to the hard stuff, so that's the foundational stuff, we're going to move on to quantum gravity. But,
you will all receive a certificate at the end of this show.
The many worlds interpretation, it's one of those, isn't it? 1 minute, without hesitation, deviation or repetition. Can you explain the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics?
Schrodinger's cat, alive and dead. Then when you make the measurement into alive or dead, the universe splits into two universes. In one of them, the cat's alive, and in the other one, it's dead. So every quantum measurement, every quantum interaction that's measured splits the universe up. And there's one possibility in each, but there are many, many universes, and they're always multiply, making babies. And if you don't feel like you're on drugs now, then there's something wrong with you.
Oh, that's a good thing. Can I just ask the audience, you're obviously kind of interested in science and all the general gubbins. This is what I'm wanting to check, though. Hands up who's following it so far. Yeah, so like the vast majority of them, and hands up who's kind of not following it at all and wants to go home. No, not me. No, I do find it interesting, but I'm just interested in what your kind of level of understanding of all this, and if I'm just holding you all back by going,
I don't think it is really counterintuitive. I mean, what I loved was there was someone, when you asked that, and they didn't just put their hand up, they started waving, and I immediately thought, of Stevie Smith, are they waving or drowning? I really don't know for sure. But I think that the idea that someone can grasp it in half an hour, or the ramifications and all, I think that's an important thing, isn't it? That sometimes you get books that come out which kind of say we're going to explain everything about. I don't just mean yours, Brian, but they're going to explain everything. You're not going to grasp it in one radio show. You're not going to grasp it in one book, because even what you're grasping is perhaps not solid enough to. It is gradual, isn't it? That every now and again, like you were saying, Joe, you get this little moment where you think, I think I understand it. And then some days it lasts long enough that you think, oh, now I can explain it to my friends. And then you find out that your head kind of understands it, but your mouth doesn't. And there's all of these different levels of it. So I think it's important for people not to sometimes feel that they have to surrender early on. Would you say, Faye?
Quantum mechanics is amazing because it's our most successful physical theory. There's no limit to what we can apply quantum mechanics to that we know of. And it explains things from the abundances of the light elements that are produced in the very early universe, to the results of the Large Hadron Collider, to the properties of the semiconductor materials that underpin modern technology and all our phones and computers. So you can't overstate just how successful it is as a scientific theory. And yet, and that's the amazing thing, and yet there is no consensus about how to understand what it is telling us about the nature of reality. You have both those things going on at the same time. So it's stupendously exciting because there's truth there. There has to be, because it's so successful. It lets us do so many things. And yet there's this gap, there's this empty space where a picture of the quantum world should be, and we cannot give it to you. We do not know. We as human beings have not yet figured out what is going on in a quantum system.
Do you think someone knows and they're going to come along like Einstein did and go, I know, and then suddenly it's filled in? Because it seems to me like a quantum jump or a quantum leap is about, in many ways, just making a completely illogical connection, say, between two things. Correct me if I'm wrong, but is it something like that?
Yes, I think we will know. There will be progress, because it's such an intensely interesting question, and lots of people are thinking about it, and it's slightly different from some questions that people struggle with in physics and science, which are all to do with, let's put this equation on a big enough computer so we can solve it. Because it's conceptual, it's a conceptual struggle. We have to create the right concepts, and we don't know what they are. But it's that conceptual struggle which has always taken place within science and within physics, and I have complete confidence that we will eventually know the answer to the question.
Can I just say, I think it's going to be you. I
do. Faye, can we talk about your field? So one of the ways we're trying to make progress is quantum gravity, which I'd like to talk about now, which is really applying quantum mechanics, I suppose, to the universe as a whole. So could you outline what that project, that research area is?
Should we define gravity first? Because that's the thing.
We can define gravity first.
So, Joe, what is gravity to you?
It's a force.
Brilliant. Faye, would you like to add anything?
How long have you got, Faye?
So Joe's describing our understanding of gravity that we learned from Newton's theory of universal gravitation. So in that theory, gravity is a force. It's a force between every two bodies in the universe. So between any two of us, between any one of us and the Earth, between the Earth and the Moon, between the Sun and the Earth, between any two bodies, there's this universal force. And the theory tells us exactly what the strength of that force is. And we can do fantastically precise calculations about celestial mechanics, the motion of the planets. Checks out almost exactly right. There's a slight discrepancy in the predictions of Newtonian theory for the orbits of the planets, and that was a puzzle for a long time. And another puzzle about the Newtonian theory is that you can't feel this force. So according to the theory, there's this force of gravity that the Earth is exerting on you right now, pulling you towards the center of the Earth. But if you think about your bodily sensations right now, you'll find, if you pay close enough attention, that you can feel a force, which is the force of your chair pushing up on your bum. Right? But you cannot feel any force pulling you down. So this Newtonian force that the Newtonian theory says is there, you can't feel it. And that's kind of weird. It's a weird, puzzling thing. And Newton himself called his theory absurd. So he wrote a letter in which he says that this theory, my theory of gravity, is absurd. It's really not the kind of thing that anyone who has any sense can believe in. This is his own theory of gravity. Because it acts at a distance without any mechanism that creates it. So if I want to influence Jo, so I'm over here and Jo is over there, so we're distant from each other. If I want to influence her, I have to do it via some physical mechanism, you would think. I'd have to, throw a piece of paper at her or send sound waves from me to her, or use a rope, or some physical thing has to produce this influence of me on Jo. But gravity's not like that. The force of gravity acts without any mechanism at all. And Newton said, well, that's just absurd. No one can believe that. But it was immensely successful. No one questioned it until Einstein. And Einstein solved the problem of the absurdity of this force, which acts at a distance with no mechanism, by saying, there is no such force. There is no Newtonian force of gravitation between two objects in the universe. It doesn't exist. The reason you don't feel it is because there is no such force. So your own experience accords with Einstein's view and doesn't accord with Newton's view. But of course that leaves you with a problem, because now you have to explain why the planets orbit the sun, for example. There's no force between them, so why do the planets orbit the sun? And Einstein answered that question by introducing to physics a new physical substance, a new thing, a new concept, and that concept is space-time. And that space-time is curved and bent and warped by the sun, and the planets interact with that space-time, that curved space-time, and that's what causes that interaction between space-time and matter and the planets. That's what causes the planets to orbit the sun. So the concept of force melts away. There is no such concept anymore in general relativity. It's replaced by the concept of interaction. And there's a new kind of thing, a new kind of substance, which is space-time.
See, I think that's the politest way I've ever heard someone say to you, anyway, Jo, no, you're wrong.
Well, I don't mind that at all, but I'm looking at Ben's face. Go on, Ben, say something that supports me. No, not necessarily, but...
There's a big question, which is why... So, Faye works on quantum gravity. She's the expert on trying to find theories of quantum gravity. But one question you might say is, why do you want to have quantum? Why do we expect there to be a theory that's both quantum and gravity? And what's the problem, right, when you try and marry the two? And the problem is the theory no longer makes any sense. You try and make predictions for the probabilities of things to interact gravitationally, and you get nonsense. You get infinity, and probabilities bigger than 1 don't make any sense. If you imagine an electron and the gravitational force due to an electron, okay, or the gravitational field around an electron, if you could measure that field precisely, you can measure the curvature in space-time absolutely precisely in a couple of points. You could triangulate back and find exactly where that electron was, okay? But the electron's fuzzy in a quantum sense. Like I said, it's got some fuzziness in its position. It's sort of spread out in position. And so you can't do that. There's a paradox there. So the field itself, the space and time itself in the Einsteinian way of looking at things, or the force in the Newtonian way of looking at things, should be quantized, or at least interact with the quantum system in a sort of fuzzy. It's got to be fuzzy as well. So that's why we think, one of the reasons that you might think that there should be a quantum theory of gravity, right?
Yeah, Joe?
Yeah.
Good.
But why does it matter? So let's talk about what a quantum theory of gravity might look like. So, for example, I know, Ben, you work on string theory, which is a...
Oh, we're not going to go there, are
well, it's a attempt to build a quantum theory of gravity. Right?
Absolutely, yeah. And it might be the most successful attempt so far of building a quantum theory of gravity, actually. So instead of, string theory is this. Instead of imagining particles, which we think of as little dots, you can think of really tiny sort of quantum vibrating loops of string. So they're extended objects, and that tames some of these problems with quantum gravity. If you have particles, it turns out there are infinities in these scattering amplitudes, in these scattering probabilities. But if you have strings, it kind of spreads the infinity out in a sort of weird way,
So it's
in a mathematical way,
Joe.
and it makes them. It makes the theory make sense. So you can now calculate sensible probabilities of things interacting gravitationally within this string theory. There is a problem. You do need 10 extra dimensions, but we won't talk about that.
So you need
But
10
is this- well, I suppose-
extra dimensions, and how big are they? The little strings?
So, of course, we're only aware of 3 spatial dimensions and 1 time, right? So if you've got a 10-dimensional theory, you need 6, and you need to kind of hide them somewhere. So the idea is that every point in space has 6 other directions, but they're like curled up in little circles on each other. And so really, also really tiny, so they wouldn't affect conveniently. So they wouldn't affect the experimental results that we've seen so far.
So basically, that's just crowbarring something in to make it fit the.
No, you're right. I mean, you build the initial idea was great, but then people realised theoretically it fell apart unless it had these extra dimensions. It was unstable and it wouldn't. But if you have these extra dimensions, then it worked. And we don't know. I mean, so that's kind of a crowbar to try and make the theory work. But the theory of quantum gravity is so difficult to get anywhere with that people entertain it even though it's got these 6 extra dimensions.
Do you know what? Of all the shows that we've done, over 27 series, this is the one that most needs at the end. If you've been affected by any of the issues that you've heard in this show. But this is what we haven't really brought up, I suppose, is the quantum and I hope I may well be wrong in this, I very often am, but the fact that one of the big issues is getting to the beginning of the universe. That you can't manage to get these 2 different ideas, quantum mechanics and gravity, to work together, so we can get back to what, is it 10 to the minus 37 now, or 10 to the minus 38 of a second? That's how that in terms of the first moments of the universe, but the next bit becomes currently impregnable because we can't get these 2 things to work together.
Absolutely. So at the beginning of the universe, we believe there was a Big Bang. But what that really means, so that's just a placeholder name for a moment where physics breaks down. So we have lots of those little phrases which just mean we don't know. And the Big Bang is just a word, it's a phrase like that. So at the Big Bang, physics as we know it cannot be used anymore. So we can't use Einstein's theory of general relativity. So quantum gravity would be the theory that would take over from general relativity at that moment, and we would be able to answer the question, what happened before the Big Bang, even if there was a beginning. All of these questions would become amenable to, we would be able to address them if we had this theory of quantum gravity. So it's exactly at that earliest time that we need a theory of quantum gravity to answer these most fundamental questions about the origin of the universe.
Can I just say one thing as well? How important do you think scientists themselves are in all this? Because you're going to hate me for this, but when I was at Brunel, I did a course called The Sociology of Science, and it was all about how different individual scientists had like a kind of impact on how science progress. So, what happens in science is it's not the increasing amount of knowledge building and then suddenly, ta-da, there you are. It is like a quantum jump. So you're going down one road and then someone goes, but what about this? And everything is overturned. And then you sort of need to start re-examining it again.
That's when the really big discoveries and changes of picture happen. So I think the difference is what's happening at the cutting edge of science. And there, things are uncertain. We don't really know. And there, I think the scientists do, on a short timescale, it does matter what people think, and there are fashions and things at that cutting edge. But eventually, experiment is the grand arbiter, and it tells you, in the end, okay, these theories are wrong, even though they were very popular. They're just not right in nature. And, eventually things seem to bed in.
If I ask a philosophical question, because really what we're talking about, as we've talked in the last few minutes, is a theory that aims to describe the origin of the universe. So philosophically, if we had such a theory, what would that mean, do you think, to you and in everyday life? What would it mean if we fully understood how the universe began, if indeed it began?
Well, I suppose it would explain everything that we don't understand, wouldn't it? That's what it should be doing. But what I don't understand about the Big Bang is, like, who came up with that? I mean, it could have been anything, really, couldn't it? It's just like, there was a Big Bang. That's like something of 3-year-old would go, "Oh, Big Bang," and then it
Well,
all
no, yeah, that is, yeah.
It was Fred Hoyle who termed the phrase. He didn't like the theory of the expanding universe, and he was using it as a pejorative term in a radio interview, actually.
Oh, and it got adopted.
Yeah, and then everyone thought, that's a good name, we'll use that. Yeah.
So you're right, it was someone going, "Oh yeah, well these are a big bang," and was looking down at it, and then went, "Oh yeah, cheers, thanks
It was
very
the
much."
same with black hole, wasn't it? The same thing. That was that John Wheeler who.
My daughter actually asked, it's Chat GPT, to ask to write 5 jokes in the style of me. And one of them was apparently, I went into a shop and said, "Have you got something that will make me look thin?" And the shop assistant said, "Try a black hole, that sucks everything in." So that's not a bad joke, is it? I'm going to use that and pretend it wasn't ChatGPT. It was me.
That's the joke you can take away with you. We asked our audience, what is the burning question you would like the Infinite Monkey Cage to answer and why? So, this is very good. Did Avon die in the final episode of Blake 7, right? I thought that was going to be from you as well, I know.
Sorry, where does Robin get those magnificent manly cardigans?
Yeah, they are manly, aren't they? And I'm wearing manly badges today as well. But Joe, you've got some as well.
Oh, yes. What force is acting on my husband's socks that causes them to defy the laws of elastic, fall off his feet and disperse around the house?
Knitwear entropy, one of the worst forms of entropy. What else you got there, Brian?
Related, actually. Given the relativistic effects of time dilation on a moving body, how fast does a lettuce have to travel to outlast Rishi Sunak's premiership?
Who really did start the fire? Why? I've always suspected Billy Joel. That's from Kira, thank you. I burnt my flat down. Can I just say I'm quite proud of it when I was a student, and because I had a candle alight and the bed caught fire. But you know what it's like when you're a bit drunk, you just go, sort it out in the morning, don't you? So eventually the whole thing went up. So I started the fire, sorry.
Well, there's another one similar. What are these things that can only get better? And when will that happen, according to the rules that govern the effects of the space-time continuum? Yeah.
I like this. What's that bright light in the sky that seems to be getting closer? I would like to know how worried I should be. And that's from a concerned T-Rex.
Thank you to our panel, Professor Faye Dowker, Professor Ben Ellenack, and Dr. Joe Brown.
Thank you.
We're 14 years old now, and so like a lot of teenagers, we don't think you understand us or our music. And actually, I say you don't understand us, you probably do understand me. It's just Brian you don't understand when he talks about Lagrangian mechanics. And you probably will understand his music. You like show tunes generally, don't you? That is your favourite thing. Isn't it rich? Aren't we a pair? You with your feet on the ground, me in the air. Anyway, so that's his favourite.
I feel like I just sat next to Judi Dench.
I know. But anyway, so we might think that we know it all, but next week we are joining up with a show that really is a properly grown-up show, because next week we are doing a show which is a partnership with the 67-year-old Sky at Night. So hopefully we'll see you then. Bye-bye.
Without your trousers in the infinite monkey cage. Now nice again.
Hello, I'm Brian Cox.
I'm Robin Ince, and welcome to the Infinite Monkey Cage. And today, for the final episode of this series, we have brought Brian home, because we are in Geneva at CERN, home of the Atlas experiment, the Large Hadron Collider, and of course also, as we know from the British tabloid press, the world's premier creator of bonsai black holes, little mini black holes that will undoubtedly ultimately destroy civilization. So how do you make the black holes here, Brian?
Well, the first thing to say to the listeners, this is drivel. But you know when you want to be remembered for a quote. like Carl Sagan's billions and billions, which he never said, or something like that.
The cosmos is everything there is, everything there was, and everything there ever will be.
Something
We are all made of star stuff. The stuff of us is the stuff of the stars.
So what's your equivalent then?
So when you look up my most cited quote in all my career, public engagement, public understanding of science, it's anyone who says the LHC will destroy the world is a twat.
Yeah.
That's it. Anyway.
Well, also, while we're here, because of course you did also pretend to work here in the same way you pretend to work at Manchester University, and this is kind of one of the homes, to some extent, of your most cited paper, isn't it?
Just before we get going talking about the Higgs particle, then for the listeners at home, my most cited paper that I've written in physics is WW scattering at the LHC without a Higgs boson. So it was a complete failure in that sense, but it's the thing that's been my most successful paper. So there you go. Failure is rewarded in physics. Anyway. Today, we are asking, what is the Higgs boson and its role in the standard model of particle physics? Why was it so important to discover the Higgs or to prove its non-existence?
And now that we've discovered the Higgs boson, what next for the Large Hadron Collider? We are joined by a particle physicist, someone who was nearly a solid-state physicist, and a theology student, because it's the God particle after all. And they are...
I'm Katie Brand. I'd like to call myself a theology graduate, if you don't mind, because I did leave 20 years ago, but always we are a student of theology, right? So I'm Katie Brand. I am a writer, sometimes a comedian, and an ignorant but willingly enthusiastic sort of amateur physicist. So that's why I'm here. And the question we were posed tonight was, what was it? What would we like?
One project you would most like to gather an international team of scientists to solve?
Yeah, well, I mean, this is my dream. It feels like real pie-in-the-sky stuff, right? But I've been thinking about it all the way here, and I think if I could solve anything with an international team of scientists, it would be what happens when you smash particles together really fast in a massive underground tube. But I know that's a pipe dream, I know. So instead, I'd like them to solve how it is that I can fall asleep so easily on the sofa, but when I go straight to bed, I'm suddenly wide awake, because it drives me insane. I feel like that's more realistic. If you guys could help me with that, that would be great. Forget the tube. I'm slightly worried there's someone at the back worried for me, going, Katie, you do understand that we do have the tube here. You could visit it. Anyway, no, I had a great time with the tube. It was great.
Hi, I'm Tavong Yu. I'm a lecturer in theoretical particle physics, and the thing that I would most like to solve with a team of international scientists is the mystery of why is the Higgs boson so lonely?
I love that you actually anthropomorphise the Higgs like that. Oh.
I'm Clara Nellist. I'm a particle physicist working on the ATLAS experiment with the University of Amsterdam. And I would like an international team of scientists to study the mystery of the disappearing cups of tea. Because whenever I make myself a cup of tea, I go back to coding or watching TV, and then I look down and it's gone. And I hypothesize that there is an alternative dimension where it's just made entirely of tea. And that's where my tea goes to, and I'd like to be able to hack into that dimension so that I could have infinite cups of tea. That's but if any grant listeners, grant reviewers are listening, I'd like to also discover dark matter. Thanks.
My name is Ben Miller. I am an actor and a children's author. And I actually have approximately 3/4 of a PhD in solid-state physics. The puzzle I would like a team of scientists to solve is, I'd just like them to write up my PhD for me. And then give me a really easy viva. I mean, really easy. But no, I suppose the question I would like answered, but particle physics is a mess, isn't it? Let's be honest. Let's just get it all out in the open. There's too many particles. You guys have just not stopped for years and years. I just want to know, is this enough particles now already with the Higgs? Is this the last particle, or are there more of these particles? And if there are, what kind of particles are they? It's not funny, but that is my question.
And this is our panel.
I enjoyed that, Big Ben, because in the sound check you said you'd get between a third and a half of a degree. Now you've gone up to three quarters.
Yeah.
I'm beginning to wonder if the fractions were the problem when you were
It's
studying
asymptotic. It's asymptotic. The number of times I mention my PhD, the closer I get to having actually finished it.
Do you remember we for a joke once? I think it was on Monkey Cage. It was a radio show we made, and we got your supervisor in, and we thought it was going to be really lovely. And Ben hadn't seen his supervisor for a long time, and he was actually quite annoyed because I think you
Really
did all
resentful.
the research and then stopped at the moment you started writing your thesis, didn't you? So
Yes, I was actually
you've
doing
done the
quite
work.
well. I mean, I don't know if there are any fans of Coulomb blockade, but yeah, I was there right back in the early days. It's not my name, and my supervisor, Mike Pepper, is actually still absolutely furious with me that I didn't finish my PhD. Very understandably, really.
See, I told you, Brian, scientists get really angry when physicists waste their time going into showbiz. Anyway, Katie, I just wanted to ask you first of all, before we get into kind of the full-on science of you, today was your first day of going down, seeing the Atlas experiment. We went, I think 83 metres underground, and I think that first experience of seeing, what was it for you?
Well, it is a sort of weird, strangely spiritual experience going down there. It's like the sort of journey to the centre of the earth moment, and all the stuff leading up to it, it's all quite fun and theatrical. I mean, I know obviously there's health and safety things, but I just mean me as sort of someone who comes from film and entertainment. I'm just like, great, you have a wire door with no unauthorised entry, and Clara had to have her iris scanned. This is amazing. This is better than my wildest dreams. So the whole lead up to it feels to me, as a layperson, amateur, quite theatrical, and it sort of preps you for it. So you feel like you're going on a journey to the centre of the earth where something magical is happening, where people are trying to solve the universe in a giant tube. And then you get down there and you do feel like you're sort of, well, I felt anyway, close to the magic. And I said to Bent, do you feel like you're actually vibrating differently yourself? And I just realised I was just a bit excited and slightly hungry. To actually be there thinking this is where you do it, this is where you smash particles together to find out what's really going on in our universe. But I was very quiet afterwards. I felt quite subdued. It's more in your mind what's happening in there. It's not the lumps of metal, it's what they're doing. I really felt the sort of magic of that.
Well, that's what we're going to find out today. So we're going to find out, is it magic or is it physics?
For listeners that don't know so much about CERN and the Large Hadron Collider and the detectors, could you give us a brief summary of what this machine is, what it does, and how we detect the outcome of the particle collisions?
Yeah, so we have the Large Hadron Collider, which is a 27-kilometre long particle accelerator, and it's 100 metres underground. And we accelerate using radio frequency cavities, protons and sometimes heavy ions like lead, where we strip the electrons away, to very close to the speed of light. And then we smash them together inside essentially giant particle cameras. But they're very complicated detectors that we have developed over many decades in order to study the particles that come from the collision. So when these collisions happen, we use Einstein's equation E equals mc squared, where matter and energy are equivalent, and we can change these particles into different types, or they are changed into different types depending on the quantum mechanics. And from these collisions, they change into other types of particles which spread out in like a firework shape. And then we surround this collision point with the detector, which, depending on where we are in the layers of the onion of the detector, have a different purpose. So very close to the center, we're measuring the tracks of charged particles, and then we're measuring the energy of the particles, and then we're measuring muons. These incredibly tiny particles are going at such high energies that we need a lot of material in order to stop them or to measure them.
Timo, I wanted to ask you about why was it necessary? It's in the 1960s, I think, when Peter Higgs and his colleagues they postulated this idea of the Higgs field and Higgs. What was it about the universe? What was it about we understood about the universe that meant that the LHC was required?
So if we go back to the 1960s, then the state of knowledge at the time was that everything was made up of matter and force particles. So we had the electron, we had the atoms that are made of nucleons, and there was a puzzle of how to give them mass. And the theory at the time that described things like the weak force just couldn't account for the fact that the particles had mass, and the theory itself then also gave you nonsense if you try to calculate what happens when you smash things together at high energies. So the Higgs mechanism and the Higgs boson that is a consequence of this mechanism was the thing that was necessary to make sense of this theory.
When Clara was talking about at those collisions, new particles are made. Are they actually made, those new particles, or is it basically like smashing a clock and the bits come out, the bits that make it, or is it at the point of collision that particle comes into existence?
So it's at the point of collision that the particle comes into existence based on the energy that was put in. So you don't think of the proton as like a bag that contains the Higgs boson and all the other particles, but in the actual energy, when you smash them together, from E equals mc squared, as Clara said, the energy is converted into the mass of the particles that come out of, you could say, a quantum effect, where you have all these quantum fluctuations from the energy, and out of this quantum vacuum pops out these particles. So this is why we need the LHC with a high enough energy to then produce something like the Higgs boson.
It might be worth just listing the known particles, because you mentioned the quarks, you mentioned the gluons, you mentioned the electron. So could you give us the complete zoo, the family as we know them today?
I think the standard model of particle physics is really quite simple. There's just, two types of particles, matter and force particles. And the matter particles are the quarks and the electrons, and they come in 3 copies for reasons that no one knows. And the force particles are the familiar force of electromagnetism, which is carried by the photon. You have the strong force that holds the nucleus together. This is called the gluon that carries the strong force. And then we know about radioactivity, which is why we need the weak force, and we call these W and Z bosons. And of course, gravity is the thing that's keeping you all in your seats. That's carried by the graviton. But that's basically it.
I reckon for every particle you've named, I can give you a role in show business. Try me with a particle and I'll see if I can tell you what role in show business that particle would have.
Bottom quark.
A bottom quark.
It's quite an easy start, that one, actually, for any fans of Shakespeare.
Quarks are fermions. Fermions are a nightmare. Can't share billing because of the Pauli exclusion principle. So quarks are basically...
It turns out you weren't right.
No, hang on. A quark would be a character actor. Quite distinctive, kind of not the most important name on the marquee. Try me again.
I forgot.
A neutrino. A neutrino is a special guest star. You don't see them very often, but when they do turn up, create a big impact.
Yeah. Nice. That makes more sense than the quark. Why do you think quarks are not important?
I'm not saying they're not important.
You did. You said
character actors are important. I'm a character actor. Character actors are important, but they're not like show-offs like electrons. Which basically like electron, very like a lot of lead film actors, quite small, insignificant physically, get massive billing. Everything's about electrons. Oh, we had this chemical interaction. Oh, I turned into an alkali. But yeah, they don't really justify it. They get all this attention, and they're just nothing. Fermions get far too much attention. Bosons do all the work. You've got your gluon that would basically be a supporting actor. They're there to really carry the story, hold everything together, make sure it all works, but they don't really get any glory.
Siobhan, when you mentioned that the Higgs was a theoretical idea in the 1960s, and you said that was to build a consistent theory. So what do you mean by that?
So when we have a fundamental theory that's supposed to describe everything in the universe, then we calculate what's supposed to happen, and it's supposed to give a definite answer. And if the theory doesn't give a definite answer, then it's just an approximate theory. It's a model. It works for the things that you're measuring, maybe at a certain energy scale that you could only access in the 1960s. But you know that nature does something when you collide particles at higher energies. So the Higgs mechanism is the thing that Peter Higgs, as well as lots of people came up with in the 60s, came up with this mechanism, was essentially solving this very mathematical problem. You couldn't just write down in your equations a mass term. The other way to understand why the Higgs boson is necessary is to simply take the WW scattering and take the kind of paper that you wrote where you didn't have a Higgs boson in there, and then simply try to make it work by
Can I just ask a quick
adding
question?
things to it.
Could I just ask a quick question? So the scattering is as part of the experiment, and that's what happened. No,
You just take two W particles and smash them together.
and as they scatter, that's what you're measuring. So that's what you call the WW scattering, and out of that
Exactly.
you find the Higgs boson that creates this drag.
That's one way in which you could discover the Higgs, yes, by smashing together two W bosons.
Mhm.
And then the Higgs comes out, and then it decays into some other particles, and you look for those other particles. And if you see enough of them, and they reconstruct the energy of the Higgs, then you've discovered the Higgs boson.
Clara, Tevong's a theorist and made that sound really simple.
Yeah, I was thinking
You
the
just said,
same
what you
thing.
do,
Oh, yeah,
you-
it was super
You
easy.
smash a few particles together, make a Higgs, and then detect it.
Mhm.
Could you elaborate?
It's not easy. I mean, we had to wait until we had the energy of the LHC to be able to even create the Higgs bosons. But then the other big challenge is designing and building these detectors that can measure all of the particles that come from the collisions. We also have to decide which particles to select. We have to understand our detector in incredible detail because the way that each particle interacts with each section of the detector isn't so simple. It's not like we always know the correct answers. And then also the Higgs boson particle it changes into most is the bottom quark. But because quarks don't like to be by themselves, they're very sociable, they hadronize, so they form pairs, and then they create these jets in our detector, which are just sprays of particles. And we have a lot of jets in our detector because of all those quarks and gluons also in the proton. And so being able to distinguish these B quarks from other jets is very difficult. So the actual discovery of the Higgs boson was with events it was less likely to change into, but that were a much cleaner signal in our detector. So we had to collect enough data of this very rare process to be able to see that there was a new particle.
It's a remarkable thing to think about, isn't it? You have 7,000 tons of detector, as you described it, this onion, a tremendously complex machine. And you're looking for two photons, two particles of light. That's all. It's a remarkable idea. Just to reverse a bit, so there'll be people at home in the audience. There may be people asking why. Well, Katie.
I'm not going to attempt to answer that. But as a layperson trying to get to grips with this physics, that's exactly what I was thinking, Brian, as well, is that like you always want to have this feeling of like, yeah, this is really, really interesting, and it gets more and smaller and smaller, and it gets more and more complex. But what's like the real world application? Like, what's the impact on a person like me?
My motivation to do this research, my first motivation is to understand the universe better, and it might not have any direct impact on the day-to-day life right now. So discovering the Higgs boson was a huge achievement. It's one of the greatest scientific achievements of the last 15 years. But right now, it has no impact on anybody's day-to-day life. But for me, it's what makes us human, the same reason that we make art and that we listen to music and that we love to dance. We want to know how our universe works. And for me, that's a good enough reason in and of itself. But the technology that we need to answer those questions is technology that doesn't exist yet. And so the challenges of having to build a Large Hadron Collider, to build these detectors to measure these highly energetic but tiny particles, has to be invented. And through doing this process, and also because of the ethos of CERN and the whole reason it was set up, we just release all of our results and all of our technology to everybody. And from that, there's medical technology that's come from the research we do. So PET scanners. I mean, now we have antimatter machines that can look inside the human body and are able to see what's going on inside of there. And that's come from particle physics and physics research. And there's also hadron therapy, which is a new and better way to do cancer therapy. So the medical technology that comes from this research is really important. And there's also some really cool stuff too, like being able to look behind paintings without damaging them. And that's not something we're specifically setting out to do at CERN when we do this research, but the technology that comes from it does impact a lot of everyday lives. I mean, televisions used to be particle accelerators before they got flat.
And Ben, you write very widely about science. You write children's books about science. So how would you answer that question if someone was to say to you, well, why? What is the use of this? Just acquiring knowledge? What is the point?
Well, it's about exploration, isn't it? We're an explorative species. We want to know what's at the boundary and beyond the boundary. We also have a spiritual dimension. We have a desire to know whether there's design in the universe. We have a desire to know what came before the universe. We so enjoy asking questions that we are prepared to pursue them to any length. I think that's one of the reasons we've been so successful as a species. I find it strange the other way around. There's an announcement. We've discovered that the Higgs boson is. Guess what? Particles haven't got mass. They're getting the mass from this incredible field. The field is communicated by a particle called the Higgs boson, and they go, yeah, not really turning me on. And you think, what is the matter with you? These are the fundamental questions that underpin it all,
But that seems to me one of the great things that came out of CERN and the LHC. It was on mainstream television, on primetime news shows. There were people explaining the Higgs field, explaining the Higgs boson. This should be the Trojan horse to get people more excited to know what they're made of and what everything they see around them is made of.
Yeah, I think the fact that the Higgs boson has become a household name, I think, really speaks to volumes about the fact that the public is interested in these big fundamental questions. And there's sometimes a sense where it is a bit esoteric, that we're just discovering particles left and right, and that, oh, look, the W mass is a bit different than what we thought it was. And I think this is not really capturing what we're doing it for. It's not like we're playing Pokemon and we've got to catch them all. It's not because they...
Really
fun. Yes, that's also a part of the fun. But the Higgs boson, wasn't just the last missing piece that we had to find because we wanted to collect them all, but because it is fundamentally different to anything we've ever seen before. And it's something that is at the heart of many mysteries of things we still don't understand about the universe. So getting to higher energies, getting to measure things more precisely, looking not just at particles, but at the cosmos and what's out there, is a way of getting closer to nature's fundamental truth. What is the underlying elementary particles and the basic fundamental forces that governs everything?
You said something powerfully true there with the Higgs boson is like nothing we've ever seen before. Could you dig a little bit more deeply into what the Higgs mechanism is and how the Higgs mechanism entered the universe as far as we know?
We've basically seen all the different types of things that nature can do. And we've seen the matter particles, the force particles that are allowed. And the last thing, in a sense, that could also be allowed is the Higgs boson. And this was what was needed to give masses to all the other particles. So the way in which the Higgs does this is to break what's called electroweak symmetry. So this is a symmetry between the weak force and electromagnetism. To explain what a symmetry is, I would give the analogy of if you have two twins that are naked, you can't tell them apart. But if you put clothes on them, then now you can tell one of the twins from the other. So the weak force particles are like these twins, but there are three of them, so they're actually triplets. And these triplets, you can interchange them in your theory, and the theory stays the same. You can't tell the difference. So the Higgs boson is a thing that dresses one of these and distinguishes them from the other two twins. And this, other particle is dressed up and looks kind of fancy, so goes off and marries another particle.
What sort of things do they wear? Retro punk, or what's the ideal kind of outfit for each one?
So this Higgs boson dresses up this one of the triplets and dresses that in a nice suit. This particle goes off and marries another force particle.
Let's say they're wearing
couple,
a nice Vivienne Westwood outfit,
exactly,
something, kind of like quite attractive, bit sexy.
And we give them a name, we call them, the photon and the Z boson. They pair up, and that's what we call the electromagnetic force and the weak force, the W's and the Z's.
Ben mentioned the link to cosmology. So what do we know about the way the Higgs began to play that role as the universe unfolds from the Big Bang onwards?
Everywhere around us is the Higgs boson, with an energy configuration that enables it to do its job, to give masses to the other particles. But as you go back to the Big Bang, and as you go back to the early universe, when the temperature was higher, then the energy configuration of the Higgs boson was different. So you think of this energy configuration as being above the kind of energy configuration that it is in now, and we visualize this by, say, a Mexican hat, where right now it's sitting at the bottom of the Mexican hat, and in the early universe it had more energy, and it was sitting somewhere at the center of the Mexican hat, at the top of the hat. So when it's sitting at the center, then it's switched off. It's not giving mass to any of the other particles. And as the temperature of the universe drops since the Big Bang, then at some point the energy configuration allows it to go to this value that it has nowadays and do its job. But we still don't know how that transition happened. And this is one of the reasons why we want to understand the Higgs better, so we understand this cosmology.
Claire, I just wanted to, because there was a point there about 5 minutes ago where we had possibly the first time where subatomic particles were beginning to enter RuPaul's Drag Race. And I'm kind of intrigued, because also talking about, when you mentioned, for instance, the Mexican hat, the physics, it seems to me, especially particle physics, it's always looking for good metaphors and for good similes. So how difficult is it to find the best translation, the best visual translation for something which is very hard to picture in itself? Did you have a favourite one?
So yeah, my favourite one is a snow field. So the Higgs field is a field of snow throughout the whole universe. And then the particles get their mass depending on how much they interact with that field. So if, for example, you imagine a skier who's got some very nice skis going across the top of the snowfield, this is like a photon. It's just essentially not, well, a photon, I would imagine, was on a paraglide, not even interacting with the field at all. And then somebody on skis is like an electron. It's kind of touching it a little bit, but not interacting too much. And then my favorite particle is the top quark. So a top quark is like in snow boots. So they've taken the skis off and they're just trudging through the snow. And then the Higgs boson itself is an excitation of the Higgs field. So the Higgs boson is a snowball. And so once you've discovered the snowball, you know that there must be this field of snow somewhere that the snowball came from.
Is there a department here at CERN that comes up with the metaphors? Is there the metaphor department? Because Ben and I could maybe sort of, with a bit of practice, just man that for you. You could come and explain it to us and we'll sort of mostly understand it, and then we'll come up with just a list of metaphors that you can use.
So you can have a little booth somewhere near reception. You've got that little kiosk as you go in that sells the hats, which I think is a bit mercantile, frankly.
Yes.
Sells the hard hats with CERN written on,
I did get a CERN
have a care, people.
Yeah.
We can have a little booth there, and you basically, you can just sketch an outfit, and I'll say which type of actor that particle is. I think we'll get there very quickly. I do want to ask, though, in all seriousness, my question at the beginning, about other particles, and we've talked about where we've got to so far, and we found the Higgs, and we know what its mass is. But, what other things might there be out there? What other particles might there be to discover? Presumably they'd be heavier than the Higgs, is that right?
They'd be either heavier or too weakly coupled for us to have detected so far, so they could just be very, very shy. But they could also be much heavier than what we expected. The reason why I said that the Higgs boson is lonely is because we expected it to have friends. In many of the theories that we thought would have solved the mysteries associated with the Higgs and other aspects of the standard model, all of these theories predicted that we'd discover not just the Higgs boson, but maybe a second Higgs boson. Maybe we'd discover other matter particles. Maybe other forces would have shown up. So there was a lot of excitement when we found the Higgs as expected, followed by a lot of disappointment and puzzling and self-doubt and questioning whether or not we even had the right principles and the right theories to begin with. So we still haven't seen these particles. And this is making the situation actually very interesting and in some ways more exciting, because it means that we may be missing theoretically some new idea, something radically different to what we expected or anticipated.
I was wondering, is there anything you're sort of scared to discover that would make you nervous, or that you think, I think that might exist mathematically?
One of the biggest mysteries in the universe is what is dark matter. This has been measured and observed cosmologically, but we don't know.
What is it, by the way?
So dark matter is, it's been observed by galaxies rotating too fast. So through many different observations, we've seen that there's something very massive in our universe. Everything that we understand, the standard model that we've been talking about, it only makes up 5% of our universe. And so we don't know what dark matter is. The only thing that we know it has is gravitational effect.
Right.
But we're also, and it's one of the reasons that sometimes people say, you've discovered the Higgs, great, are you done now? Is it time to turn the LHC off? And it's not, because first of all, we want to understand as much about the Higgs as possible, but also because we know that dark matter has a gravitational effect, it could be that it gets its mass, if it's a particle, and it might not be, that it might get its mass from the Higgs mechanism, the same way that other particles do. And in that case, by studying the Higgs boson as precisely as possible, we're looking for differences between the standard model predictions and what we actually measure in our experiments. And then that could show that something else was happening with the Higgs field that can't be accounted for with the quarks and the other particles that we've measured. So it's a really great way that we can use it as a link between the Higgs boson and potentially being able to understand dark matter.
Oh, I just wanted to say that we also see dark matter in the early universe, so we can't be planets because we see the effects of dark matter in the light from the Big Bang, the cosmic microwave background. So we know already from that there was some kind of dark matter particle. And it's not as exotic as it sounds. We already know of a particle that doesn't interact with the light that exists everywhere in the universe.
Even here and right now?
Yes.
Even right now, going
so
through
the
us.
Large Hadron Collider is full of it?
Everywhere.
So
you're full of it. I'm full of it.
That's fatty talk where I come from.
So there's a billion of these particles going through your eyeball every second, right?
Just to clarify, because we're coming towards the end, Tavong is talking about neutrinos, which are particles that interact only via the weak force. And I thought he said this remarkable thing, that billions of them are passing through your head now.
But only you.
Is that why I'm here?
So one of the ideas, right, so bring it back to dark matter, one of the ideas is that perhaps dark matter is a particle that interacts by the weak force, but then you need an awful lot of them passing through your detectors to have a very slim chance of seeing them. And we have experiments that try to do that, or it would be very unlikely you would make a dark matter particle in a collision at the Large Hadron Collider, but we might.
Yeah, so we're often looking for things that are missing in our measurement. So we don't just measure the particles that come out and only measure those. We also look for example, missing momentum. So we have conservation of momentum in our detector, and so we can tell when stuff is missing. And neutrinos are very, very light, so if we got stuff missing that was very heavy, then that would be an indication, for example, that there could be dark matter in the measurements. And we're also doing some new techniques because we've always assumed that the collisions happen and these particles are so short-lived that whatever they change into happens right at the heart of the detector. And so we've trained all of our algorithms to select for the data to look for stuff happening in the center. But it could be that dark matter or some other new physics travels a bit of a distance through the detector before it then changes into something we could measure. And we call these long-lived particles. And so it could be that they're interacting at the edge, and so we have to redesign all of our algorithms to look for things that are happening there.
Yeah, it's great, isn't it? So they could be there in the data.
Yeah, they could already be there, and we've just not been looking for them in that sense. So that's one of the other ways that we're trying to innovate and think, well, how else could it show up in our detector?
This idea of the universe having mass, it was the first time that I'd ever thought of when I started reading about the research that was going on. So could you have a universe without mass?
You could have all kinds of universes. It just wouldn't be one in which we could survive or live. So if the Higgs, in fact, its energy configuration right now in our universe, in the standard model of particle physics, as best as we've measured the parameters of this theory, is telling us that the energy configuration is not stable. So it could change to another energy configuration and induce a catastrophic vacuum decay death of the universe that would just wipe out the entire universe.
I would like to very clearly state here that the Large Hadron Collider would have nothing to do with this.
No,
Just
we will
to
be
keep
cutting out your bit at the end. We're keeping, if I was Dan Brown, I'd keep that answer there.
Wait a minute. You're saying that we've built this collider to find the Higgs, which holds everything in the universe together, and you've discovered it's unstable. That's what you're telling me.
Within the standard model of particle physics, yes, which is why we really hope that there's something beyond it.
Also, it's only very slightly unstable. As
You
far
need
as
to
we
get building the
measure
next one now. You need to get on it. What are you doing?
We call a cliffhanger.
That's just one reason.
Why are you sitting here doing a radio show? You need to be getting off backstage. Get your toolbox out. Start making the next one.
Well, just to reassure, if it is indeed unstable, it was unstable whether we detected it or not. That it's got nothing to do with us.
Then.
It's got nothing to do with us.
know then.
And does that make
told me it's gonna? That's just
well, you're just
really
advocating-
inconsiderate.
You're advocating for ostrich-like behaviour. Why does it matter? You're saying that if you don't know,
Let's just
it's
enjoy
fine.
these last few minutes we've all got together and see what we ask the audience.
It's a nice moment, Ben, after the audition, where you still don't know if you've got the part or not, and for a while you'd rather not know. It's like that, isn't it?
That's
How are you
probably
so
what you'd
calm
expect.
about all of this? How are you just sort of, well, if we knew the universe was unstable, then it would have all gone to pieces by now.
Because we wouldn't
How
see
are
it
you
happening.
so relaxed? How are you so relaxed about this situation? Is not everyone else really stressed by
I'll
this?
tell you why, because he finished his degree and he's worked out a get-out clause.
But just to finish, this is pointing towards the future. It's a signal that there's something deep that we don't understand.
Right. So some theorists, like myself and many of my colleagues, do try to explain this by saying it wasn't an accident. Maybe some dynamics in the early universe actually balanced the Higgs boson right at the edge of this precipice. And this is something that we're actively trying to look for other signals for.
Is this supposed to be reassuring?
We're on a precipice. At least we're still on the precipice.
Yeah.
Look at the bright side.
Yeah.
Anyway, we've run out of time, so we're going to just... we asked our audience a question as well, as we always do, and we wanted to know, what is the secret of the universe you would most like to uncover, and why? Brian, what have you got?
We asked you before, how many of you are physicists? And you said about most of you are physicists, right? Usually, when we ask this question, the aim is to generate humorous answers.
Yeah.
In this case, they're all very specific and precise.
Yeah.
There actually are answers to the question as posed. So, for example, where does it stop? So the joke is, what's the secret of the universe you'd most like to uncover and why? Where does it end?
Do jazz hands. I'll do jazz hands for my one. Dark matter. So there we go. Yeah, that still didn't quite get it working, did it?
Is space-time just a side effect of a selection of quantum fields trying to achieve their respective lowest possible energy states?
Right. I think
Yes, it is. Yeah, I've got that one. Yes, it is.
Right.
I wasn't open with it.
Right. This one right now, I'm going to do it right. Okay, so, all right, ladies and gentlemen. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Now, what is the secret of the universe you'd most like to uncover and why? I'll tell you my one. My one is, what's the rest difference between rest and virtual particles? I gave it everything, mate. I gave it absolutely everything there.
This is from one of the few non-physicists here. Where do all the socks end up? So that's okay.
Yeah, the one that I particularly like here is, why in the UK are bathroom hot and cold taps separate? Oh, man. If that was the biggest issue the UK were dealing with now, what joy that would be. And then finally, of course, how come, and this is a science question, how come Brian Cox doesn't age? Because I do all his aging for him, right? I'm 1 year younger than him when we started working together. In fact, if you might have seen, there was a visual beforehand where I had lovely dark hair and it was all over my head. Not since I've worked with him. No.
Yeah, I was going to say, I do age at the normal rate. It's just the contrast.
I was wondering if one of you just moves much faster through space-time than the other. Yeah.
Well, that's all we've got time for. Thank you to our panel, Dr. Clara Nellist, Dr. Tevong Yu, not doctor or professor, but he should have been if he'd completed his PhD, Ben Miller, and not Archbishop or Dean, but she's glad that I believe she's not an Archbishop or a Dean, Katie Brand. That's a fitting end to our series. We've learned that we are on a precipice. We began with Egyptian mummification and we've ended up with elementary particles.
Now, of course, what Brian didn't actually know about today's episode is that this was actually a honey trap to get him back to Geneva under the instructions of CERN's governing board, because apparently 12 years ago, he was in the middle of the meeting and just suddenly went, hang on a minute, I've just got to pop out. I've just got to get into a helicopter for a while and talk about superluminous supernova for the BBC, but I'll be back in a minute. and he never returned, thus breaking his contract. So now he is here. He's not allowed to leave CERN for 2.5 years until his contractual obligation is met. So I'm going off on holiday for a few weeks. You have work to do to make sure we don't fall down that precipice. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Without your trousers in the infinite monkey cage. Till now, nice again.